Yep, thanks Tim for starting the recording.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, morning. Okay. Yeah, apologies. Just waiting for our chairman. Hasn't quite arrived yet. All right, I'll just give it another minute, and if Richard doesn't join, I'll we can kick off. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the 34th PD Working Group session. My name's Doug Potter. I'm Principal Zone Manager with Arcadis. Just let Robert in. Hopefully you've been able to see the agenda on presentations. There's been a couple of minor tweaks. Unfortunately, Phil Gregson, who was presenting later, is down with the flu. So we've done a little bit of swapping around. Katie Harmon as well is off sick. We will, in the usual way, have a chat room. So any comments we'll try and monitor, and if we don't pick them up during the meeting, we'll hopefully pick them up later. There should be probably a couple of 10-minute breaks to suit through the morning. We've got a slightly extended morning through till 1 o'clock. I'm not sure we'll go all the way through with a couple of presentations dropping out, but thank you for everybody who's attending, and the presenters are on. What I'll do now is I'll just take the agenda off and swap over to the safety moment, which Liz is going to present. Hopefully that's now on screen, Liz.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Doug. So yeah, I'm going to present something that happened at one of our projects, M42 Junction 6, which is related to design change, and I thought it was very pertinent to obviously share with the wider community. If you skip to the next slide for me. So this actual design management change resulted in a service strike incident that happened in November. These maps just show the location detail, which are a bit irrelevant here today, but it was to do with a gantry replacement. So if you go to the next slide. So this gives some of the background around what happened when, because it's quite a complicated situation. So during 2020, it was identified that some of the existing gantries would not be adequate enough to support the new scheme signage requirements. So we identified some gantries which now needed to be erected, which were not in the original scope. And one of these was gantry 20, and it was put into scheme scope late 2022. And this was basically a replacement. The approximate distance was very close to the existing. And at that stage, a design decision was made to locate the new gantry foundation in the same line as the existing foundations to reduce the likelihood of interface with services. Now, at this stage, there was actually in the possession of the designers an existing, very old drawing, 1970s as built, which showed a concrete carrier drainage pipe. But obviously the accuracy and location of the service was poor on those records, and that was the only existing drawing. No GPR or trial hole survey requests were made to verify the presence or location of that existing service. And an assumption was made, a design assumption that was made that the existing drainage service would not impact the new foundation. And they were not specifically identified on or coordinated in the design drawings. So that really old drawing was never fully explored, and it certainly didn't make it onto drawings or into the model. So next slide, please. So we carry on, fast forward to 2023, November. As part of our normal permit to break ground process, we undertake some surveys. At this stage, we did a SON survey and Cat and Jenny survey. This sort of image here is just the Cat and Jenny data, which shows how we did attempt to survey that area. There was a lot of interference anyway with the SON survey due to the proximity of the VRS and other metalwork, very difficult to interpret. And we were not doing any trial holes. So what then occurred, the actual incident, if you like, which resulted in the strike, was some sheet piling. And at approximately 1.7 meters below ground, the auger hit resistance. The operator then assumed that this was just a local hard spot or lump and carried on working. Pile was completed, and following which an observation was made that the concrete level in the pile had dropped. It slumped, basically. The team were really great, actually, on the ground. They responded, they realised something had been hit. They were able to get all the concrete out while it was still wet and actually do a lot of really good work. But further investigation followed and confirmed that the drainage service was located there and that the pilot damaged the service, the drainage channel. So next slide. So this is again just the timeline, which shows from 2020 through to when we actually completed our investigation. What became really interesting to me is that in January, we actually discovered that the original gantry foundation, so the old gantry, also went straight through the drainage channel. So there had been a previous incident back in whenever that gantry had been put up, probably, I don't know, 80s, 90s, where also the drainage had been hit. So next slide, please, Doug. So obviously I've spoken a little bit about this. We stopped the works, we visually examined the area, we had communication with our design team post-incident. We confirmed this drawing had existed but not made it into our site drawings. And we had further dialogue around a series of assumptions that have been made by various members of the design and the construction team throughout the identification and implementation of works. And the assumptions really were around identification and verification of existing services and the requirement for positively proving service locations or clashes with permanent works. And I think there was, I would say, in all honesty, a lack of check and challenge on both sides of the fence, design and construction. Slide, please. Root cause analysis. Drainage run was struck by the auger during piling, and the underlying causes are really all around the design change. So this was added into the scope at a later date. drainage run was not positively identified and confirmed on works drawings. That information flow of really old historic drawings, even if that had been put onto a drawing as almost like a hashed area highlighted, we think there might be a drainage channel here, we don't know where it is, what depth it is, that would have been something to go on, but that was not passed over to the construction team. So conflicting assumptions were made, and that's resulted in a service strike. So next slide, please. So learning, it's really about that focus on asking the right questions around existing service information within the hazard ID process, and actually making sure that you do actually at design stages have hazard identification meetings involving all relevant people. Verifying details within DDMS on site during design phase and subsequently any design changes. I think this is the point, is the actual design change. And this business about making assumptions and who should take the lead on identification and specification of site survey requirements. So, but that whole conversation about survey requirements way ahead of when we were doing the installation just did not happen in this instant. So actions, what we're doing within Skanska, we're reviewing our change management process through the design management stages, specifically reviewing our principal designer responsibilities under CDM. This is an RDP scheme, so we're PD as well as PC. So regardless of whoever your designer is, if you're PD, you've got that responsibility there to make sure that you're planning and managing any construction safely. Pre-con has ID workshops to draw out design assumptions and construction assumptions for understanding and alignment. And it's almost like, don't just, I think from a personal note from me, is you do a lot of work at design stage ahead of when main construction starts. And then you think, oh yeah, that's that all done. That's not that all done, because the design, as we all know, changes, you know, halfway through the construction phase, 3/4 of the way through the construction phase, some other bits are in scope and other bits are out. So you have to keep that dialogue and that HAS ID process completely fresh throughout. And this review of coordinated service plans and permanent work design details prior to starting new phases of work. So I think that might be my last slide. I'm not sure, Doug, is there any more or is that it?
That is your last slide, yes. Thank you very much for that. I know you've got to dash off, so
I do, but yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if people have got any immediate questions that I might be able to help with, and I'm happy to try and answer questions if I can. I might not have all the details, but for us, this did result in a serious incident review, obviously, because it's a service strike, which we had up in the Midlands area with the team up there. So we've, and I think it's important to just share the learning. The actual National Highways team were very pleased with our review of this incident in the end and our openness and transparency. So I think that is another message for me, is like, if you've messed up, put your hands up, you know. Oh yeah, any questions?
There's nothing in the chat. Nothing in the chat. Rob. Oh yeah, Robert, yes.
I mean, I like the way you've neutrally presented it and thought about really, you know, how the whole team approach is has looked at the problem, and we all really don't want to be striking services or causing damage. I think there's an obvious sort of factual look at process and design drawings, including a little bit more detail and that sort of thing. But you can almost imagine that all the steps were in place all up until the last moment when information went to site, you know, and the information was there. Quite, you know, a useful record of an issue for us to keep honing our skills, really.
Yeah, I think there is a big piece around information flow, because there's just so much information, isn't there? And it's like, how much of that makes it into drawings, into models, into things that site teams are really reliant on when they're. And for me, that survey bit, the type of surveys required to carry out works, because, and I know that's difficult, that is difficult. Even if we'd have done trial holes, you know, we may not have found that drain. Even if you'd have done GPR, would you have picked it up? I don't know. But the question for me as well is how many more of these drains in the verges have been hit previously, and we don't even know.
Probably. I'm conscious others have their hand. I'm just thinking of the whole process of pre-construction information is obtained by or on behalf of the client. So it's the client's in the client's sort of domain, but then it's owned by the project. It's free to hand on. You know, we shouldn't be reluctant to hand on pertinent information. Perhaps, you know, present it differently if we don't want it to go on design drawings, but that would be, you know, slightly strange. But yeah, useful. Right, I'll back off now.
Okay, thanks. Davey's got his hand up, and there are 2 or 3 questions have come in as well, Liz.
Okay.
Hi, Liz. Great presentation, nicely put together. I think we've all nearly been there at some point. Was there a reason why the design teams didn't go down the route of GPR? Was it because they were working in the same area and they thought it wasn't necessary, or was there a lack of confidence in the stuff that GPR picks up?
To be honest, we've not really explored that. I mean, my initial thought was, why hasn't there been a GPR? That was my absolute, and for me, it was almost like there was an instruction, and it was like, oh, we've got to do this. So there was an instruction that ensued, which was really badly worded. If I'd have received that instruction as a project director, I would have been going, it's unlikely you're going to hit a service. Or I would have kicked that back and started the conversation around, well, do we need to do GPR? Is there a service? How can we verify this? Give me the information. So to be fair, I feel like we potentially as principal designer didn't do that check and challenge piece strongly enough, but I think the design team just was like, it's almost like it just didn't enter the consciousness for whatever reason. It just wasn't on the table as a thought, you know. Mark.
Thanks.
Yeah, so one of the fundamental things, this was additional work where the drawing ended and all the survey specs ended. Like, you know, if you imagine drawing a line across the land, we did everything up to that boundary, and all the utilities and everything continued up the motorway for the rest of the way. When the additional works were done and certain people weren't informed, and this extra gantry that was just outside the footprint of all the completed works, you know, you've got a line where you stop and everything is completed into there. That's where the area is. And so then when they looked at the drawings, because there were additional work, we'd got GPR and everything in for all those areas. But if you're doing work in an area we've not surveyed, then there's no information. And if it's very close to the boundary, because you're just doing it an extra 30 meters beyond your scope of works, you go into this area. It is a new project. You can't just go and put another gantry, and you need to treat this as an extended of your DCO. Essentially, that was happened. If it had gone back and this gantry had been in the initial works, it had been picked up in all the initial surveys and everything else. So you can't just add something on because it's just 5 meters up, because the information just stopped 5 meters before.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. That is what happened.
And essentially, generally, that is, we used all the technologies everywhere else, and it was that. And if you even extended the lines by 5 meters.
I think the other thing to note on that was that obviously, what I guess what disappointed me was that obviously everyone knows that everything that we'd surveyed up to that point still carried on down the highway somewhere in that verge. And you think, oh God, why didn't someone just think, well, obviously the drain hasn't stopped just because it's not on the drawing. So yeah, it was a real Swiss cheese of events in this particular instance. But
okay, just conscious of time, but there's a couple of quick questions. So was VAC-X considered?
Well, no, because we were piling foundations.
Okay. How's the new design information been integrated into the updated federated model for that segment of the asset?
I don't know. I would hope so. And obviously our drawings for handover will include it where it is.
And Nick Miles said, if you do not know where something is, then you need to do a trial, unfortunately, to a depth. So,
the extreme version of that, just for info, there's a horrendous example in City of London where outside Moorgate, where the underground line is no longer on the map. So you talk about drainage pipes. Well, they actually managed to auger bore through the tunnel lining just in front of a train, and that's because it was on a curve and it wasn't on the map. And all right, that's an extreme version, but unfortunately with drainage, if you don't know where something is, we end up having these discussions about, do we do a trial hole on the location of the pile to 1.5 meters down just to verify it? And it's crazy because actually you're swapping another risk for another risk, but you have to, I think you have to do it.
Yeah, agreed, Nick. Agreed.
Okay, thanks, Nick. And I appreciate you've got a display, Liz. So there's a matter arising. Just an update on the highways common induction. I think you've had a meeting with Teresa.
Yeah, we had a meeting about Teresa, with Teresa about the common induction this week, and yeah, we're reviewing the common induction in terms of what that looks like. There's not going to be a separate designers module. You are going to be brought into the fray though, and well, you already are. There is a requirement if you go to site, but that might even be broader. We're rescheduling it. So that there's going to be a separate driver's induction, which will obviously help to sort out a lot of the issues we've had with drivers stopping, etc. But I'm aware you all drive, so maybe there will be a driver's module, a site-based module, and another module. So that conversation is ongoing, and I think the timeline is pretty short for getting a review of the actual text and video filming completed. So that I don't want to give you a time. That's not going to happen, but I'm going to say within the next 2 or 3 months. It's short.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that update, Liz, and thank you. Yeah, really interesting safety month. Obviously, generated lots of comment. I can drop onto the Master
I'm
Rising.
back on. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes,
I
back
was
on
just going
later.
to say I'm back on a bit later, but don't panic if I'm a bit late. I will be jumping on. I promise you. It's just I'm sort of doing lots of different interviews today to try and recruit for this project. So, but I will jump on at the allotted time. Doug,
Okay,
so.
thanks, Liz. I'll try and keep us on time, but okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Richard, do you want to just?
Yeah, I apologise. New Teams is a new world, and it doesn't seem to be as robust as old Teams. I actually had Doug and I discussed, did we have a safety alert? And he reminded me we had Liz, and I was in a meeting yesterday and we were discussing the recent lantern failures. So this is the covers on luminaires that have been falling off. We've had a lot of extensive winds, but we now have a situation where we have 1,000 lamps that have been incorrectly installed. This is an ongoing issue on the M25 M4, and they haven't followed the CHI memo on lanterns. If you remember, about 3 years back, we had an issue with manufacturing of certain luminaires going up on our systems, and there was a CHI memo issued, and they advised a safety lanyard to be installed. The lanyard that was installed on these luminaires is incorrect. It hasn't followed the CHI. Maybe one of my cynical colleagues yesterday said maybe they're the only ones that were in stock in the yard. We're working with this supplier at the moment to try and resolve this. Interestingly, 12 months after the project has finished, the health and safety file hasn't been issued, and a safety alert is coming out from SES on this one. Okay, so CHI memos, luminaires, lanterns, please, can you have a look at it, the lanyard? I will try and find it during the course of this meeting, or share it later. Doug will share it later, but it is of great concern. And it also just reminds us how important it is to keep up to date with information that's coming through, even when you're quite in the depth of delivering a project. You know, CHI memos are important. Possibly not always the best way to communicate information as well. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, thanks, Richard. So I'll just quickly go through Masters Rising. So there was agreement that Martin Partington would present at the Hub, which has duly happened. This is the 5x5 risk matrix that happened on the 2nd of November. A number of digital related matters.
Sorry to interrupt, Doug, but we actually have some principal contractors who are actually using that now. The 5x5 matrix.
That's good news.
Yeah, which
good
is
news.
brilliant.
Yeah. So Matt Lampert was contacted Nina Warminger to discuss the CDM documentation review by National Highways. Mark, do you want to give a quick update on that?
Yeah, well, I see Nina is on the call, so thanks very much for your response to my email and going through my spreadsheet, which basically looked at EN 105 and also looked at the health and safety file guidance note and the template. And I would just note for the record that EN 105 has now been withdrawn. I checked on the portal this morning and it was withdrawn in November. So that removes EN 10508. But I think the main conclusion from Nina's review was I think there's quite a lot of major projects to review further. Nina, I don't know whether you've got any further updates on that, but it looks as though that's still work in progress to align the major projects and OD versions of the health and safety file template, for example. So that seemed to be the conclusions of your review. Nina, any comments? Nina's very quiet, so I take it that she doesn't have anything to add.
Okay, well, maybe we could pick that up later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so some comments around the health and safety file digitalisation, again, relating to Jason Glass and David Stone. Richard, you were going to see if you get in touch.
David and I have a meeting organised now.
Okay. There was a comment around the Annex 15 and the use of RTBs, etc., and relating to MPI 23. I think we'll get set up a call with you, Richard, later. Mark's just been looking into some various documents, etc. So we'll set up a call if that's okay with you. In respect to GIS, so Mark Lawton had asked if there was a GIS working group had been formed. Unfortunately, Katie, you were going to speak to Katie. Unfortunately, Katie's rung in sick. I don't know if you've had any further discussion with Katie.
Katie
offline.
has no recollection of this conversation whatsoever.
Okay. Well, I've got some contacts within National Highways, so I'm going to chase those through after this meeting. Nick Boyle mentioned that Syria had looking to set up a geospatial community of practice, and again, I think that's something to take up with Jason Glasson. I think Richard, yeah.
Yeah.
The BIM working group, question as to whether that was what current status of that was, and again, that was, I think, an issue sitting between yourself and David Stone.
It is. It's part of the agenda.
Okay. There were a number of questions around the safety by design template and check sheets, etc., that were linked to the supply quality plan and the PCF product update, and we've been picking those up through the design risk management standardization task and finish group. There was a comment around higher safe speeds adjacent to traffic management and the update of GD 904. I think you were going to speak to Will Spare on that, Richard.
I'm done, sir. Sorry.
Okay. Number of comments relating to NSCRG and Daniel Lacey. So M25 trial. Daniel's come back. I think he's on the call, but we'll be presenting later. But it's now accepted that the NSCRG approach is that it's business as usual to implement traffic management by the supply chain, and that's linking to sort of work that Keith Smith has done, who's also a member of this group. Question around management arrangements for safety risk assessments. Will there be further comms coming out? So there's a previously published management arrangement in September 23, Further minor updates planned, including clarity on assurance by the Board Safety Committee.
Nick's on the agenda, isn't he? Dan's on the agenda.
Dan, sorry, yes, he is. Yes, yeah. The question and obscuration of site via radar, CCTV, etc., and vegetation. Cyclical maintenance, including vegetation maintenance, is a risk being monitored through the NSCRG risk register, with a meeting to discuss the operations in February, and that's linking to the. Okay, right. Martin Sherlock was going to provide access to the group to the knowledge portal, which has happened. There was a question from Pav around the Norton to Wynyard Health and Safety File digitalisation presentation, around capturing lessons learned. I think Nick's on the call. I don't know if has that happened, Nick, in terms of sort of lessons learned coming out of that? Nick, are you there?
I am there, just trying to remember which item it was.
It was related. Well, it was basically a question around lessons learned, whether reports have been produced from the what you've done on the digitisation of Norton to Wynyard.
I haven't seen the final output, but apart from the presentation, yeah. Okay.
Well, pick that up again. And then there were just a couple of quick ones coming out of the follow-on meeting that we had. Question from Mark Lawton about guidance for inspections, etc. And Martin Partington is picking that up with OD at the moment. Richard had requested that Martin identify some of the produce lessons learned from our case studies from some of the design for maintenance examples that were presented, and again we'll be picking that up. And then there was a question from Liz about the contents of RTB 26 and the crossover between major projects and operations directorate, and we'll pick that up as part of the design risk management task and finish group. So that's a quick run through of the matters arising. So I see John has joined. So apologies, we're slightly behind schedule, but over to John Dowsett, who's the new chair of the SCSLG group.
Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing? You okay?
Morning, John.
Good morning. So so I've just right. Can you see those slides there?
Yeah, that's come through.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. So I've got just a bit of an update really in terms of this morning. So I'm not sure how much you're familiar with the work of the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group. So I thought I'd just go back a little bit to then come forward again in terms of a little bit of history in terms of the group to date, and then where we're looking to go within 2024, and how it links into the work that you're doing within this group, and how I think actually it can be even closer linked moving forward. Okay, so just in terms of introduction and just kind of a reminder really around the vision of the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group. So this is the work obviously that was started by Phil Clifton back in 2019, and then Adam Green took over 2 years ago, and so delighted, yes, as you rightly say there, to take up the reins as chair for the next 2 years. So looking at the vision there, so we're really focusing on the kind of the significant risks, so those risks that can create significant or fatal harm to the people working on our behalf, and really looking at, it doesn't mean that we're not interested in avoiding the slips, trips and falls and some of the LTI type stuff as well, but a real focus on those things that are significant, life-changing injuries, fatal harm, things that that really impact the people working on our collective behalf. So and looking at ways in which we can eliminate, substitute and isolate those risks in a more effective way. So in terms of sort of 2023, so building on the work that was done in 2022, that's where we started the significant risk thinking approach, and we identified 10 significant risk areas from a piece of work that was done, really good collaborative piece of work that was done right across the industry. Lots of feedback from lots of different tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers from across the industry fed into that process. And the overall significant risk approach really focuses on a system approach to eliminating and reducing those risks as opposed to a people-based approach. And I'll show you some of the above the line, below the line sort of thinking shortly. And so significant risk thinking was really launched kind of last year at the Engagement Council on the 15th of March up in Leeds. And at that point, we really encouraged all businesses to profile the significant risks within their business. And they're slightly different. Clearly, we all do slightly different things across the industry. The risk profiles are slightly different for different businesses. But it's really important that everybody understands the significant risks related to their works and starts to build a significant risk strategy around those risks. So we launched a series of technical webinars. A number of you on the call may have attended one of those sessions, and they were split into 3 different sessions. So an introduction to why significant risk and why that approach, and then some guidance and support around how to prepare a significant risk strategy, and then really how to profile those risks for your own individual businesses. And throughout 2023, a number of working groups were established to focus on the first few of the significant risks. So we weren't looking to do all 10 straight at once. We wanted to get 4 or 5 groups up and running, start to get some good traction, and then start to introduce the other groups as and when we started to get some output from the first few. So just in terms of this diagram really is just kind of linking back to the previous slide. So we've had a great level of feedback from suppliers around the education, starting to attend the workshops and really starting to engage with this approach. So 113 out of 143 suppliers engaged within the education there, so 79%. So that's great, and we've got some good work ongoing to ensure that we close that gap and get that up to 100% or as close to 100. Clearly, there's always a little bit churn in terms of the supply chain, some of the small suppliers coming in and out of the industry, but we want to get that as close to 100% as we possibly can. In terms of the profiling and the strategy there, you can see actually we've got more people have done the profiling than have done the strategy. So, but again, there's lots of support that Andrew and the team are providing through the performance group to enable any organisation, so particularly the smaller organisations, are really keen that they have some support. They're not left to their own devices to do some of these things. They might not have the resources in-house to be able to do them. So we're here to help, here to support, but we're really keen that we get as many organisations as possible really starting to think about this type of approach within their businesses. So that's the work that we've been doing through 2023, and I guess for myself as chair coming into 2024, really for me it's about building on the successes of the work that we've done to date. So it's not about reinventing the wheel, it's not about starting again, but I really do think that the work that we're doing, there's a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of great focus, but it's how we make a difference to the people that are working out there on our projects every day, every night. Yeah, that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where we've got to get activities and actions that we're delivering that really do start to impact those people and eliminate the risks that they face when they're working out there on their strategic road network. So I think one of the key things I wanted to do as well, so there's been like a little bit of a group of the supply chain safety leadership group, and then the working groups. For me, everybody working in any of the working groups, they're part of the supply chain safety leadership community. And so I want it to feel like a wider community where everyone can impact and everyone can support and everyone can get recognition for the great work that they're doing to support in our overall vision. So I wanted to create a steering group. So we need a steering group that provides some leadership and direction, but actually have that as a slightly smaller steering group than what we've had previously, and but really raise the profile of those that are leading the working groups and those that are driving the change from within them. And another key point for me, and I think it links into to the invite this morning, is I'm really passionate that we have a closer link with both the safety hub, but with also the principal designers working group. So I think if we're not careful, there's too much fragmentation and lots of good effort and good energy. But actually, if we could just pull some of these resources together and make sure that we're really clear what each other are working on, then I think we can make more of an impact more quickly. So in terms of what does that look like? Well, so that's the diagram that I've drawn. So with the steering group there, so we've got a performance group which are really kind of looking at the data, looking at the leading indicators that we're going to generate for each of the significant risk groups, and then looking at how embedded some of those things are across the industry. Clearly, communications is critical, making sure that we've got the right level of communications, ensuring that all of the good work that we're doing is embedded and making a difference. and people are aware of the work that's taking place, and can understand how it all fits together, because I think otherwise it feels fragmented and people don't quite understand where it all fits. And on the right hand side there in that top box, leadership and culture, personally I'm very passionate about the impact that leadership has on making a real difference and creating the environment, creating the culture for success. And I want to introduce that sort of probably towards the end of 2024. So really thinking about keeping the strategic risk thinking approach, but actually understanding the leadership and the culture and the environment whereby that significant risk strategy is more likely to be successful. Okay, and then you can see there either side the principal designers working group and the safety hub, as I say, really keen to make sure that we get the links into each of those, and that we're sharing best practice and working more closely together than perhaps we have done previously. So the current risk groups, you can see those, that top line there. Won't read them all out. You can see those for yourselves. So we've got some good traction in each of those. Some are more advanced than others. Things like James Hullock's incursions group. Clearly, that's been working for many years. So that's very well advanced. Some are just starting. So the occupational health one is a more newly formed group, and some are going through different iterations in terms of change of leadership. And I'll come on to the safer and healthier by design group, because I think that's the particular touch point for the team here as well. So I'll dwell on that just a little bit more detail in a second. And then the other 5 groups you can see at the bottom. So 2 of those we really want to get started as early as we can in 2024, and then the other 3 we'll look to bring in as and when we get a bit more traction on the other groups. Okay, so some of the work that the Safer and Healthier by Design group have started to look at. So as I touched on at the start, the overall principles are really around kind of above the line, below the line thinking, in terms of that system-focused approach and the people-focused approach. And clearly, yeah, in the design community, there's a massive opportunity to have a huge impact in this whole thinking. Anything that we can do in terms of above the line, system-focused, really thinking about how we can get design solutions, digital rehearsals, standardization of design, standardization of specifications, all of those types of things are hugely important, a massive opportunity to make a real difference. And that's what the group have been looking through. They've also been working through the whole kind of the hierarchy, and just thinking about how we can use the design community, use the design solutions to really, you'll see Malcolm there share the left shifting approach in presentations that he gives, and really thinking about how do we left shift as many things as we possibly can, really get design, buildability and solutions and kind of road space planning and all those types of things built into the solutions, such that actually we're not reliant on those things below the line. We're not reliant on people and behaviours in quite the same way, and we're certainly not reliant on things like PPE as the last resort. So lots that the team are focusing on in terms of their current activities. So they're due to release a common intent for safe and healthy design. So that was due to be released just before the Christmas break, but we're hoping to see that this month. We've got the session with the team tomorrow, so I'm hoping to get an update on that. So they're looking at standards in design and looking at how they can be developed to improve the approach to significant risks. We're also looking at Safer Highways website and looking whether we can set out a kind of section within that to make it easier for designers to find information that we need. So part of this is really about communication and making sure we bring everything together. So we've got a new lead for the group in John Pilkington. John's kindly agreed to take the group forward in 2024, taking on from the great work that Ian Spellersy has done previously with the team. And I guess a kind of plea from me is really new memberships are welcome. So there's a couple of people, Ian included, but that have had to move on to other things, and so aren't available to support in the same way that they have in the past. So there's an opportunity here for anybody here to get involved. And again, obviously, if there's people that attend this forum that can get involved, then clearly that helps to improve the synergies and improve the interrelationships between the two groups. Okay, so that's all I had to cover. So but I think we've got time, Richard, Doug, have we, for some questions?
We have, yes.
Yeah, there's a question. Yeah, there's a question from Martin. SCSLG, are the proposed groups in addition to the current risk groups? Maybe Martin, if you want to
yes,
add to that.
They're not in addition to the current risk groups. So they, when we set out, so there was 10 risk groups identified as being required. What we've done is we've just introduced them more slowly. So Adam certainly from the outset was really keen that we didn't try and just start everything at once, and that we actually started to get 2 or 3 things done and done well, rather than starting on all sort of 10 working groups. That answers your question, Martin. If not, perhaps if you wanted to come off mute.
I think Martin's just had to dash off to another meeting.
Oh, right, okay.
But,
yeah. Sorry, yeah, I'll see the next one there.
Yes. There's a question from Paul Brown.
Want me to explain that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the
Go on.
the other side triangle on your, I think it was your last but one slide, John. The top line was managing significant risk of harm. Now, that's kind of where we come from principal designers when we're looking at foreseeable hazards.
Yeah.
And our definition of significant harm, which is the unusual, unforeseen, unexpected, difficult to manage type stuff. But that slide actually, I'd have thought, since you're looking at the significant hazards as defined by the SCSLG, that you should be talking about the top line is something which produces a risk of significant harm rather than a significant risk of harm. Am I playing semantics there?
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. I do see what you mean. Yeah, I think this slide was, yeah, this come from the working group, so I can feed that back in. Just make sure that they're approaching that in the right direction.
That actually came from the working group that was looking at Safer by Design in 2019, led by Atkins. So so designers have contributed to that. So yes.
Yeah, so
it was the point I made to your predecessor, John. That, you know, from a principal designer perspective, whilst I appreciate where you come from with the significant hazards, ones which are going to cause significant harm, we've still got an obligation as designers to focus on foreseeable risks.
Of course, yes, but yeah, as I say, I mean,
it's,
yeah, this
merging the two is sometimes difficult.
Sure, yeah, I think, and one of the challenges that we had when we presented to the National Highways Exec was around, yeah, there's an increase in the smaller type events, but there's been a higher frequency of lost time injury type injuries across the network, and so one of the challenges that we got from the safety committee was just around how does our approach link into that. And I think it does to some extent as well, because this is all about good practice. This is all about raising standards. This is all about focusing on left shifting and thinking above the line activities. So for me, it links into avoiding the smaller types of injuries as well as the more fatal risks.
Okay, I think Mark. Thanks, John. Got his hand up.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Really useful update. Really just more of a request than a question. There's information about Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group on the Hub website, but it's very out of date. So please, could that be updated? And it'd be really useful to have more visibility because of what SCSLG are doing via the Hub. So really just a plea to keep that updated, please, so that we can see, what progress is being made.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely noted, Mark. Yes, the need to improve the comms, and yeah, this work only has an impact if people know about it and start to embed that good work into their organisations, and that doesn't happen unless we communicate clearly and we engage and consult with a wide number of people across the business and across the industry. So I think it's really important that we continue to do that. And what I'm proposing is that we will have more sort of broader forums with the Supply Chain Safety Leadership group community. So all of the people working on any of the working groups coming together once every 3 to 4 months to kind of share some of the work that we're doing in each of the working groups, and to sense check that against the broader community, get some feedback on the proposals and all of those types of things. So I think that will help some of that engagement, but clearly we need to get the websites up and running more effectively and get more content in there. We need to use social media more effectively, and equally, if there's any other ways in which you think we can improve that communication, or the ways in which we can engage more effectively with all of the companies working on the network, then please do sort of feed those through, because communication is such a challenge, isn't it? We've got such a broad spectrum of organisations, such a broad geography. So any help that you can provide in terms of making sure that these things are landing, then would be much appreciated.
I think it's a bit of a history, and there always is with most things in life. 2019, when this group started off, we decided, rightly or wrongly, to piggyback on the Highways Safety Hub webpage. The Highway Safety Hub webpage is a great source of information, but it's also the crystal maze. It's quite difficult to navigate, and I think one of the things that we also need to discuss, John, at one of our monthly meetings is how we can improve the Highway Safety Hub webpage or create another page. But obviously that has to be paid for and managed and supported, which is another challenge in this world.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, well, we can pick that up with Vicky Covey tomorrow.
I think Rob's got his hand up.
Yeah, hi, morning, John. Morning, everybody, and
Hi, Rob.
Richard. I just wanted to pick up. I can't remember whether it was Paul Brown or Doug who was speaking about the significant risk side of the work that SCSLG have done, and I'm reluctant to display it really, but I did a little bit of an exercise mapping across a Jacobs critical risk set that we have, HSE major accident stats for fatalities and significant injuries, and then the SCSLG hazards, and then looked at some Crossrail evidence, and also Costain recently shared sort of a five major risks that they consider. And when you look at the sort of matrix of the significant risk types that the SCSLG have created as a sort of a notional thinking that these are, I guess these are the things that are causing us most difficulty at the moment and difficult to manage. We seem to be getting lots of alerts around these topics and that sort of thing. So I suppose it would be wrong of us to, in our sort of blue sky thinking for hazards on a scheme, to ignore also a sort of a stream of consciousness that suggested we also had sort of habitual topics to look at that were causing us problems, currently. And I sort of welcome the sort of, if you like, the help in the direction of travel to say, actually, when I look at designers' hazard registers, yes, we get lots of routine information and that sort of thing. But also it's useful to just then do a quick sort of sense check. Actually, have we covered those sort of, broadly speaking, because they're quite wide topics, those 9 significant hazard themes, and then are there other ones that have crept in, perhaps that are just as significant, perhaps don't quite drop into one of the boxes. So I want to support the process. It's not the only answer to us. We have to be broad in our scope and diligent and thorough, but it is I think the topics chosen have been, they resonate, and it's a good direction of travel that we're going in with that.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I mean, clearly, the fact that we're focusing on those topics doesn't change anyone's responsibility to focus on the health, safety, and well-being of our people in all areas of whether that's through design, whether that's through implementation phases. Clearly, we all have a collective responsibility to do that. The only purpose for us around focusing on those areas together as a kind of collaborative community is if we really focus on those areas that are causing the most significant harm. And that work was done, as I say, as consultation across, I think it was about 100 or so organisations that contributed to that, using their last 5-10 years worth of data to fill into it. So that's where those came from. And the purpose of our focus is if we can really just get those and do those really well, and eliminates some of those things from occurring on our projects more frequently, then we'll have had a bigger impact. So as I say, it doesn't change the broader responsibility that we have, but it's just about, if we can really focus on those, we can probably make more impact more quickly. And focusing on less but doing it really well is probably the right thing for us to do. Otherwise, we'll end up trying to solve the world and doing it badly.
And it's trying to establish a strategy that is proactive, not reactive. And sometimes we fall into the trap of being reactive, rather like the lantern lighting columns and lanterns issue we spoke about earlier. And thank you for sharing information, Nick, on that. We'll circulate later.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any more questions in the chat, and no more hands up. But so unless anything else comes through, if I could thank you, John. It's great to see you, and I'm looking forward to the collaboration over the coming months.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many within the group who will be very supportive of your objectives. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today, and yeah, I look forward to catch up with Richard and make sure that we're properly linked together moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay. So we'll now move on to the NSCRG update. I will just share screens in a second. Hopefully Daniel's there. Yeah. Just
bear
with me a sec. Hopefully that's come through. Probably not, because I'll have to start doing it again.
Up now.
Brilliant stuff. Dan's got a lot to share, because I was fortunate enough to hear what he's going to be touching on yesterday in another meeting. So yeah, there's a lot of activity within the group, which is exciting stuff. And one of the things is they want to make sure that everybody knows about what they're doing, isn't it, Dan?
It is, definitely. Thanks, Richard. So yeah, I've got 6 topics to cover in this relatively short time. So it's summaries from November and January. The first one was next generation cyber futures. So Emir Thomas gave a presentation on the relationship between safety and security for digitally enabled strategic road network. And this highlighted the need to develop suitable, sufficient governance for cyber risk security, and using the best practice for how safety governance is fulfilled through GG 104 requirements, which my team own, and looking at safety risk assessments and from learning from other industries such as network rail. So it was a really good presentation, and we had some feedback and actions as a group. The first one was that we'll be promoting the safe and secure by design from a cyber perspective. Cybersecurity should be integral and the sort of golden thread through our processes for safety, with clear linkages and handover between directorates, which is really important. Cybersecurity may be more mature at the implementation stage, but ongoing management following implementation may not be as rigorous. And the final point that we had back for that one is we'll review our consideration of safety criticality in national highway systems in accordance with the agreed legal definition, and apply an additional lens of intent for systems to go wrong. So that was the first thing that we covered off. The second thing also in November was the operational technology performance availability update, which was ongoing monitoring of actions against the NSCRG risk register for high level overview of current operational technology performance and availability. So we covered everything from CCTV to SVD and ERTs, and looking at the performance of those and how well they're working and when they weren't working. And the next update will be a more granular detail of these, because it was a very high level overview, and I think we needed to get in amongst it a little bit more. 2 points we pushed forward with that one is, what do all business areas and national highways identify as the responsibilities that they own, and what are their touch points, and how does their function fit into the complex blend of all these processes, including people, technology, infrastructure. And then also, how does the perception that we have match their reality? So in reality, how well are they working? Do you want to move to the next one? Signalling for roadworks update. This is just an information only one. So a proof of concept trial for signalling for roadworks, the use of that in DINAC is planned for the East Midlands, North East regions, with training and monitoring in place in November 2023, prior to the national rollout. NSCRG confirmed that a finalised suite of signalling for roadworks rules and guidance documents is needed for DINAC, and that will be presented again for acceptance prior to any publication. The fourth one was information only again. It was the traffic officer zero emission vehicle pilot. So it was a brief summary given to the use of this new electric Maxus T90. It's like a sort of flatbed pickup truck by traffic officers for a proof of concept, and 5 vehicles trialled in addition to the existing fleet, and will be used to better understand the performance range and, amongst other factors, how it affects the traffic officers and their day-to-day. And the pilot will take place in 3 regions. Evidence of suitable and sufficient safety governance were being applied through documented safety risk assessments, and appropriate consultation was provided. I think Ian, who's on the call, did some work on that. And further iterations of the safety risk assessments will be provided for information acceptance as the pilot grows. So what are they learning from it? And, as it goes out, that'll add to that safety risk assessment. And any updates informed by planned monitoring will be provided as well. So we're looking forward to that one. Next one, please. So this was a charm update. This was the January NSCRG. So this is the new integrated advanced traffic management system that's rolled out in 5 regions that we all know too well. 2 more are going live, South East and East, for October 24 and February 25. So monitoring did show that the regions are achieving the 3-minute performance indicator to set signs and signals. However, further work is being undertaken to try and improve this performance. Previously, raised was issue identification, investigation and resolution via AIMS, heart record review and analysis, and new system releases, and then also the continued engagement with the operators to understand their user experience and how it's working for them. The feedback from this meeting was suggested that they go to the lean team and review the signal setting process and identify any opportunities to eliminate waste or work in a different way to improve the performance. And then obviously the continued review of that data and intelligence sources, and utilising wider organisational team support to get more people on board to support. And then to identify a time frame for setting blanket signals for unconfirmed incidents with signs and signal setting. And then hopefully coming back in July with any updates that they've done, any lessons learned and any improvements that they can provide us. I think I've got one more to cover too. Yeah, so there's a couple of links here for you to go away with and have a look at. So it's to do with an RAC promotional video and news item promoting safety advice for how to stay safe on high-speed roads during a breakdown. And this highlighted key considerations such as where to stand when exiting the vehicle. And the key data was quite interesting on this, that only 22% of 1,900 drivers surveyed would know the correct action to take. 11% of those would actually stay in their vehicle, which we don't advise. And this corresponds with reports that 78% of motorists at incidents attended by the RAC were still in their vehicles on arrival, which is really interesting to be fair. So it's discussed at NSCRG to whether National Highways messages are getting enough traction with road users and what can be done. So can we work collaboratively with the RAC, with the AA, the police, etc., and have a sort of one voice view and this vision and all sharing the same information and the same advice. So this has gone to the SLT, and I think everyone's on board saying, yes, we should be working together for one clear message and making sure we get more traction, which is really good news, and we'll be involved in that quite a lot moving forward. That is the 6 topics quickly ran through, because I know we're quite short on time. So yeah, any questions? If I can't answer them now because I'm quite new to role, I will get back to you. Feel free to drop me some emails and I'll get back to you. Joe normally does this, but me and Ian will be representing the team moving forward.
Any questions
Okay.
for Dan? Or Mark's got his hand up.
Right, Mark?
Yeah, just a quick question. The RAC video about how to stay safe, does that specifically cover smart motorways as well? Because obviously the instructions are slightly different.
No, I don't think it does. But that will have to be something that we consider moving forward when we get that sort of one vision, one view approach. But no, have a look at it and see what you think. And any further questions, just ping me an email.
Are you
It's
able
also
to put the
a-
link to that in the chat, or
Yeah, I'll
that
copy
would
them
be
in.
good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no worries.
Thank you.
But it's also a reminder to ourselves, our own personal health and safety, whilst we talk about design, etc. Is, you know, do you actually have a high vis vest for yourself, maybe for your family in the car, etc. And have you sort of reminded your family about how to get out of the car, which side of the car to get out of if you break down or have the misfortune to break down, etc. You know, on any road really, and how to stand away and keep the phone charged, etc. All useful reminders.
Yep, definitely. I'll drop those links in. I'll just get them off the original document.
And at our next meeting, Dan, will you be updating us on the progress with the review of GG 104?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dan. You brought us back on track. So we were going to have a quick break and come back at 10:30 when we have a presentation on CAP. Okay, we'll see you shortly.
Thank you. Sorry about before, Doug. It's the new Teams. It's not very robust.
Okay, I think it's past now. Hopefully everybody's coming back. So we've now got a presentation on connected autonomous plant by Aimer. Hopefully Aimer's on the call. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I will share the slides. Just bear with me a second.
I'm happy to share it from my side if it's easy for me to drive it.
Well, if you wish, that will be fine. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully they're coming up okay.
Yeah, they're up. Yeah.
Okay. So good morning, all. Thank you very much for the invite. My name is Amresa. I'm the Supply Chain Innovation Advisor at National Highways and the project lead for the Connected and Autonomous Plant Initiative, also known as CAP. Just a shameless plug at the beginning. We do have a CAP dedicated webpage where we've published everything related to CAP in terms of the latest developments, so be it reports, videos, etc. That I encourage everyone to visit. I'll share in the chat later on after the presentation. But in terms of today's presentation, I plan to cover these elements. I look back at what we've achieved in terms of the phase 1 and phase 2 initial efforts, as well as the current phase 3 aspect, before we then go into a future look as to what may be coming up in the very near future, and contextualizing it in terms of the DFT activities and interest within the space of CAP. So, in terms of phase 1 and developing the roadmap, initially, when we had our first RIS period, there was the ambition that by 2040 we will be delivering our construction and maintenance schemes up to 30 to 50% cheaper than we do today. Now, that statement initiated some work by my predecessor, Minir Akhtar, in trying to establish what this means in terms of construction activities on our sites. And does this mean a complete overhaul of how we work, who's going to be working, what technology we might see on the sites, etc. And to help digest that information, we worked with industry to develop a visual to really represent and bring to life what we mean by a CAP site. And through this research, it became very evident that if the benefits to manufacturing were reflected within construction and adopted by the construction site at large, then we could see productivity gains in excess of 200 billion by 2040. Now, it's fair to say that there are a lot of assumptions behind that, and the DFT is currently working on some market analysis to try and de-risk some of those assumptions, but I'll go into that in a bit more detail later on. So this visual really represents a series of, or a fleet of construction machinery working together or in harmony, utilizing the likes of communication technologies and drones with minimal interference from operatives on site. And that's in essence to try and remove the operative from the hazardous site environment to improve safety metrics of our sites. Along with this visual, we developed a roadmap to establish the key tasks that need to be achieved by industry at large, not just National Highways, and to have a look at when this could realistically be achieved by. This is the first iteration of the roadmap. It's the first of a kind. And we've split the work streams up into 3 different sections: people in society, technology and hardware, and data and digital techniques. And each of those 3 themes have been further split into 3 different substreams of work. And at the time that we delivered this roadmap, we thought that we could be delivering all of these by 2035. So that's our ambition, if not sooner. I appreciate there's a lot there to digest, but access to this will be made available when I share the link later on. It's publicly facing, so you shouldn't have any problem getting into it. Along with the roadmap, we established these milestones, and they essentially act as a guide so we can understand if we're working to schedule or not. These are key activities that need to happen by 2035. And if we don't achieve any of these, then we're at risk of falling behind. It's fair to say that the bubble on the left, it was the roadmap launch itself. Phase 2 covers the cap levels, which I'll go into detail next. And the phase 3 covers these 3 bubbles here. So in essence, as of now, we are pretty much on track to achieving our goals, but we are at risk of falling behind in the near future, and I'll explain why in my future slides. In order to achieve this roadmap and the visual and the key milestones, we did work with industry, and this was a fair representation at the time of when we developed those activities. You can see from the visual that there's been support and/or interest from central government all the way through to the supply chain and OEM providers. But the other arm's length bodies are also interested in understanding any developments within the space. So for that reason, we decided to select the I3P community to disseminate the material of the roadmap, the milestones, and the visual, in order to capture a wider audience, but also to leave a legacy piece. So this was delivered through a webinar in June 2020, and it's available to watch online. Now, I will just mention that there is a problem with the link at the moment, but I'm aiming to get that resolved imminently. So you should be able to watch it on the CAP webpage very shortly. So phase 1 was the visual, the roadmap, and the milestones. For phase 2, we looked at trying to make a dent in that roadmap. And the biggest hurdle that we saw at the time was how we define capability in terms of connectivity and autonomy. And we settled upon what we call the cap levels. Now, in essence, what we're trying to do, if we are to remove the operative from the site environment, we need to instill a level of intelligence within the machinery. Now, as humans, we typically carry out observation, understanding, decision, and action points subconsciously several times throughout the day. Now, the R aspect of the UDA cap levels refers to the continued safe operation of any activity. So if it requires a user input, the operative pressing some keys, etc., providing input into the machinery, then that's semi-autonomy. We'd like to reach a point where the machines are fully autonomous and they're able to carry out operations in a safe manner for obvious reasons. So like the roadmap itself, the UDA levels are also the first iteration. There has been some work in terms of application, but it's all been self-certified by the OEMs. That needs to change going forward as far as I see it. And also the applicability of the levels themselves, they need to be researched. Do we need to go into further subcategories, or is this sufficient? There has been some parallels or some considerations in terms of the SAE CAV levels, Society of Automotive Engineering CAV levels, but I'd like to make the clear distinction here that we are operating in 2 different environments. The way that I like to describe it is static versus dynamic. So with the strategic road network and the CAVs using the road network, we're dealing with a lot of knowns, the lane widths, where the white lining is, the assets installed, etc. And over the course of a journey, not much changes in terms of knowns. So I'd like to describe that as a static environment. We're dealing with a static knowns. When it comes to construction, however, we're dealing with a completely different landscape. As soon as we put a digger or we put a bucket into the ground or we install a new asset, we move material from one location to another, we are changing the course of that environment. And any of those machineries or the operatives within that site, they need to be made aware of those changes. So hence why we are looking to try and connect and automate the machinery and remove the operative from sites. In terms of application, this is an example that we've used for publication to industry, and it's all around compaction. On the left, we've got an example of a retrofitted solution for compaction through the offering of CAT. And on the right, we've got an offering from BOMAG in terms of full autonomy. So hopefully for that reason, when it comes to the observe, understand, decision points, it makes sense as to why those are the same. But in terms of action and responsibility aspects, they differ. The one on the right, it can do that through its own thinking, in inverted commas. The one on the left, it requires continued user input. So we published the CAP Levels 2 industry at a Future Works event in 2022. Yeah, in Peterborough. But we also wanted to go a step further in shouting about the good work that we've been doing on an international scale. So for that reason, we've made presentations to the likes of the Brussels Knowledge Day. We've made publications within the ICE, CIHT publications, etc. But we've also submitted and presented to 2 international conferences. One was more of a general focus, which was the construction in the 21st century. The other one was more of a technical focus around the development of the CAP levels, and that was in the ISARC. Both of them were held abroad, but we presented remotely. And I can provide these papers for digesting if it's of any interest after the presentation. So, phase 1 covered the visual, the roadmap, and the milestones. Phase 2 was all about the CAP levels and increasing awareness amongst the international community. And I'll now cover what we're currently developing as part of phase 3. Now, it all centers around 3 different work streams. 2 of them being more national highways orientated, and 1 of them being more focused on the industry. So task 1 and task 3, they're national highways focused, and task 2 was for industry, addressing an industry challenge. So task 1, we're looking at the commercial and standards reviews for national highways documentation. What changes need to happen to facilitate further adoption of CAP on our sites? There's a report which I'm currently reviewing, and I can share that if it's of interest as well. Task 3 was all about the testbed creation and reporting dashboard system. When it comes to CAP adoption, we want to capture a real-time and over-time view of where CAP is being deployed. There's several reasons for this. The main one being so that we can report on the efficiencies being realized and the benefits associated with that. But also to understand, would we be in a position closer to 2035 to start possibly mandating certain levels of CAP adoption on sites, because we, by then, would have hopefully evidenced the benefits that have been realized. And it's also about asking the question, if we were to accelerate adoption, how much benefits could be realized? I mentioned that 200 billion by 2040 assumption earlier. We want to start putting real figures to that assumption. So that's where the virtual testbed comes in. I've got a visit to Cambridge consultants at the end of this month to understand what that may look like in terms of physical system. Task 2, this is related to the image on the right. And Mark Lawton, I understand you're on the call, so thank you very much for being an advocate of this aspect. But when it comes to design for machines, we know that it's possible. We know that it's possible to send it either via USB stick or over the cloud from the design house to the machine on site. The question here relates around to refining that process, rather than it taking weeks or months to filter the data coming out of the site office for the machine to interpret and operate on. We want to see a standardized way of sending that data to make sure that it's refined, and also it's only providing data which is required by the machine. So rather than designing for human operatives to be on site, we will be shifting to hopefully a way where we can designed for machine integration on sites. And there's a marked difference there. And with the image on the right, essentially, what we're saying is we don't want to see designs being sent in a fashion that resembles the right of the image on the right, where we've got a series of broken up lines, maybe different line weights, potentially representing different things or potentially representing the same things. As a human, we would interpret the light blue line linking to the dark blue line, for example, but the machine won't operate that. It's very easy for us to interpret, but the machine doesn't interpret it like that. So we need to cleanse the data. We need to make it easier for the machine to read, which is what the image on the left hand side shows. A continuous line with no breaks and easy for the machine to work on. So in terms of the milestones, these are, as I mentioned earlier, these orange bubbles, orange circles are the bubbles we're focusing on for CAP phase 3, which is due to finish by the end of February. So if we reflect on the roadmap, this is not a comprehensive view of all the developments in industry. This is just a view of what National Highways has been working on and hopefully works on in the future in terms of where we fit in the roadmap. So phase 1 was the roadmap itself. Phase 2 will be the CAP levels down here. Phase 3 would cover 3 aspects, 2 being in the people and society, 1 being in data and digital techniques. And then hopefully phase 4 and phase 5, if granted, will cover other aspects to do with technology and hardware and training as well. So phase 4 and phase 5, these are as anticipated. These are the current plans, but they're subject to change and also subject to funding approval requests. Phase 4 would move to look at how we start populating a dashboard with real live data. So we're hoping to have up to 3 site trials utilizing 3 different machines on 3 different sites, capturing the data and using that to populate the dashboard with early insight into the benefits to be realized. Image on the right gives some indication as to the parameters that we might want to consider and how we might want to report those benefits. We'd want to launch the CAP testbed to the industry as well, just to make everyone aware of the trajectory. This is where we will be moving in terms of capturing data and capturing performance of sites. Phase 5 is very early days. That may happen in 2 or 3 years' time from now. But we'd essentially want to carry out a review of that roadmap to understand if we are on target, if we're being ambitious enough, or if we're being too ambitious. But we'd also want to understand, what does the future workforce look like? If we are really wanting to remove them from the hazardous site environment, where do they go? What's our expectation of them in future? Do we want to see them working in offices with setups like the image on the right, where we've got remote operation of excavators and other machinery at the flick of a switch? If so, what does that mean in terms of the health and well-being? What do we need to make sure that the supply chain provides for the workforce in terms of their health and well-being when it comes to display screen equipment adjustments? We've seen a similar occurrence in terms of the COVID pandemic and working from home. There was a shift in terms of health and well-being and the focus on DSC. We may need to see something similar for the workforce of the future. And how does the training therefore change as well? Do we need to work with the likes of CITB to develop training material? So those are our kind of wishes in terms of future activities as they currently stand. Plans may change in due course, but in terms of the DFT activities, it's very fair to say that they have had an increased interest within CAP over the past couple of years. So back in July 2023, the BSI published PAS 1892, and this was off the back of the DFT commissioning that work to be carried out, and I sat on the steering group of that PAS, and it's all about defining and specifying the use of CAP for construction and maintenance activities. That's now free to download and digest if you've got a BSI account. And I'd very much encourage downloading and adoption, and also feedback as well, quite crucially, to make sure that it is fit for purpose and it represents the market. Currently, the DFT have commissioned Costain to carry out a market analysis on CAP, looking at a UK perspective, but also global perspective, in case there's opportunity to export product. That started in November. It's a very quick turnaround project, and it's due to be completed by March this year. Now, dependent on the outcomes of the market analysis, that may then suggest the business case be developed for a centre for connected and autonomous plant. We've got a centre for CAP already in existence. The centre for CAP may be an arm of that centre for CAPs, or maybe its own separate centre by its own outright. That's yet to be determined, and it's yet to be understood by the DFT, but we're very much working with them closely to understand what that means for national highways. Do we need a phase 4 or phase 5? It's very much my ambition for the DFT to take central or take ownership of the roadmap, to coordinate the efforts from a central function. It makes sense to go down that route, but we're yet to understand what the outcomes are of the market analysis. So what does this success with the CAP program look like? I think it's probably easiest to break this down to 4 different strands with a different owner for each of those strands. So for example, the stakeholder buy-in, that's down to the DFT to coordinate and see through. Collaboration, that's amongst the OEMs to ensure those activities under there are adopted. Making CAP business as usual, that's down to the arms length bodies like National Highways, providing signals to industry, working with industry to understand the latest developments in their research. Facilitating CAP being adopted on our schemes as business as usual as well. There's a lot that we could do as National Highways and others to make sure that these trials do go ahead and we're capturing the raw data from them. And then strengthening the sector. That's essentially down to everyone, but also training bodies particularly, to make sure we've got the right skill set available to deploy within the sector for adoption. So if we were to stand in 2035 and reflect on CAP, what do we want to see? We want to see, in terms of standards, we want to see internal use. So the DMRB document set, the MCHW, we want to see them fit for purpose in terms of continued adoption of CAP. CAP is a step change, so there will likely be semi-autonomy deployed before full autonomy, and we need to see the standards being adopted and updated several times possibly. We want to see ISOs being developed, like PAS 1892 as an immediate response to an industry need or challenge. And we also want to see further certification of the CAP levels, for example. So earlier I mentioned that it was self-certified for demonstration purposes, but I don't see National Highways as being the right body to certify the CAP levels. I don't think it would be fair to ask the industry to self-certify, because that won't build confidence in industry. So it may fall on the likes of I3P or the CITB or others to enact a certification scheme. We want to continue collaboration with the likes of the TRIB, the DFT's Transport Research Innovation Board. We want to continue collaborating with the I3P to deliver messages and send out legacy pieces. And we want to continue to foster a CAP community. There's always been interest in CAP. That visual that I shared earlier in terms of the different parties that have been involved in development, that's not comprehensive. That needs to be updated and reviewed, because there's many more partners that have joined the CAP space. And also in terms of expectation, we want to start tracking sites that are using the levels to be able to report on our KPIs and how we are working towards bettering our KPIs. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of everything CAP so far. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. That concludes it, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, really interesting presentation. There are quite a number of questions actually.
Okay.
I can run through them in the chat area. So,
yeah.
First question from Nicholas: will designers be given guidance on how to best prepare designs for automated machines designed for the capabilities of a given machine?
In terms of improved designs, definitely there will be guidance for that. I'm currently going through a report that was generated off the back of a series of workshops that the Transport Research Laboratory put together for us and led. In terms of specific machine use, that may be something that's more granular that we need to look at in future. But there will be some general advice in terms of guidance going forward to provide better designs.
I think on that, I know we've done some work with Mark Lawton in terms of the complexity of information. There's almost too much information being put through and the machines can't handle it. So I think you're working on streamlining that, aren't you? I think.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question from Rob. So I'd suggest this is part of the BIM management plan for how the model is produced, a specification for what the final model data will comprise.
That's exactly what we want to aim for. And yeah, working with understanding the outcomes of the session that we had with TRL and how we then develop that into a widely accepted and adopted set of guidelines or specifications.
Okay.
Yeah, I can just on that one. The just working on the A12, I can see what the 3D model looks like, and it is a little bit fragmented. So I can understand how the lines, I suppose it's all part of the common data environment management, and that leads you to the BIM management plan as well. So
yeah,
and that exhausts my knowledge, as I say, of that subject.
Right.
But, yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
So a question from Sullivan: will there be guidance available for temporary works design to use these this machinery, or use this in machinery?
So the ambition is that CAP covers all aspects of construction and maintenance. I will be honest and say that so far the focus has been on construction, which I know temporary works was part of. But we need to make sure that we work with the likes of yourselves to understand which activities kind of exhaust the limits of CAP. So temporary works does very much fall under the remit of what we're trying to develop.
Okay, thank you. Question from David Allen-Shaw. Does this require two sets of models, one for use for humans and a separate one for machines? After all, this choice of equipment can change at the drop of a hat, even on the day of construction, breakdowns, etc.
I see Mark Lawton has his hand held up.
The answer is no. If you do it, so what should happen is that if the designer understands what the remit is for the machines, and when we talk about a machine is a controller for the surveyor, a CAD machine, they're just essentially a screen that goes into the cab of a machine. So if we get the priorities right, there should be less work for the design teams, and all the brilliant work they do, it means that there might be a flip file or a conversion. You shouldn't have to do any extra work. And that's what some of the designers in the CAP community have been trying to establish, and it looks fairly well that MJ Church are the leaders in this because they've got the young minds around it and they're doing well. So the answer is no.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Quite a lengthy question from Rob. We can imagine that the future involves less of large volume earthworks of a uniform profile, uniform cross-section, or large volume construction envelope. Our current projects are a mix of offline and online working. Has the machine operation advanced or been developed to cope with this more fragmented type of work?
Would you mind clarifying what you mean by fragmented type of work, online and offline? Do you mean
so we have online work where we're working on an existing route and adding another lane, or we're modifying areas of the structure. So it's more a sort of a there's a design, but there's also
Yeah.
sort of the refinement needed by line of sight and that sort of thing needed locally. So what I'm saying is, it's all very well having hundreds and hundreds of meters of earthworks at a certain line and level, but actually a lot of our work isn't like that.
I see. So in terms of the data that's produced for, you know, the new amendments that need to be made, how will that data be captured and provided then? Because that's the key here. If it's going to be provided in traditional terms, that's not going to work. But we need to, like Mark mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that the data provided to the machines is sufficient that the changes can be accommodated for.
Okay, a point for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, question from Daniel. How does this differ from, example, Machine Max and Cubic technologies powering the intelligent job sites? Product sensors on plant which provide performance data which can be used on any type of plant and is focused on larger plant with potential to be used for carbon reporting as well.
Mark Claus, I know you've got your hand up. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, so everything you just said there, the machine racks, is about the performance of the machine. And just like you said there, design for machines is the line work, the geometry that guides the machine to lay the tarmac, the earth, the drainage in the right place. It is optimum output.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Alexandra, have we considered the risk of the automated digging machine finds asbestos, for example, in the soil, and works need to be stopped immediately until the asbestos is removed safely from that site? Or what happens if an unexploded bomb is found? Is the machine smart enough to stop unforeseen circumstances on site, etc.?
So, very short answer to that one is we haven't considered that at the moment. And in terms of the fail-safe system, we're still working to understand the implications of that. For example, if we did have a situation where there was an operator in the machine and it was semi-autonomous, where it requires continued user input, if there was a hazardous environment encountered, do we want the system to just completely stop the excavation, for example, or whatever activity it may be, or do we want to allow the operator to make that decision? The reason I say that is because if there is a hazardous environment encountered and you stop the machine, you could then be actually endangering the operator's life within that situation. So questions still remain around the safe operation, and it depends on who is going to be or what is going to be in control of the machine. If it's fully autonomous and the operator is not anywhere near the machine or being remotely controlled, then I don't see why the identification of asbestos or other, for example, unexploded World War II bombs would pose a danger. This is something that we haven't considered, but it's a very good point you raise. Thank you, Alexandra, and we'll be sure to take that on board going forward.
Okay, thank you. Good point. So a comment from Rob. Hi. In general thought, removing operatives from plant earthworks has health benefits too. Eliminate exposure to noise, dust, in addition to the safety benefits. So I think that's probably reflecting what you just said.
Agreed.
Yeah. Comment from Mark. Remember, designers are welcome to the CAP group. Another comment from Alexandra, also on the human perspective, human resources keep changing daily on site, different groups of work, new staff, new management, visitors, etc. How will they be briefed on site on the same day about the highly intelligent system and avoid any accidents, near misses?
So this is why I mentioned the likelihood, or in terms of phase 5, of understanding what the future workforce looks like and how we train them. Along with that comes the daily briefings, any kind of material currently presented to operatives. How do we then translate that to a machine integrated site? Question still remains, really good food for thought to take forward. But hopefully we can cover that in more detail in phase 5 if it was to be funded and goes ahead. In terms of actually briefing the operatives, I personally believe that the future workforce is going to look very different. They're going to have a completely different skill set. People keep mentioning the gaming generation. And essentially we are looking at an industry which may look to gamify construction techniques. If that's the case, then it'll be a matter of marrying up the two, the skill set with the requirement on sites. But yes, that is something that we still need to consider going forward. And I haven't got an answer for you right away.
Okay, yeah, very interesting response. Yes, I can see that. So comment from Roger, our question, is any work being done with the likes of Autodesk, Bentley to ease the transition? Yes, there is. They were invited to the workshops on design for machines. They made representation, and they're very much willing to work with us further to ensure that any products that they develop and they provide to industry is fit for purpose for the future. So yes, work is being done there. Okay, thank you. So question from Pav, are we looking at CAP that can be part of the operation and maintenance phase of projects? How can the design integrate space for supporting plant to be used? Or how can the designer integrate space for supporting plant to be used remotely, including investigation and survey? So we are looking at that in future. So currently focus has been on connectivity. We're now moving to a space of looking at the autonomy aspect of it. But in terms of construction versus maintenance, yeah, it's fair to say that the focus has largely been on construction versus the maintenance side of things. We do, however, realize that there is a Venn diagram that exists where we've got construction on one side, maintenance on the other, and CAP sitting in the middle, the CAP technologies. And the question has been raised in terms of connectivity, where we're saying, if we are requiring the assets to be installed on site to enable connectivity from the early phases, can we look at temporary to permanent technology solutions to allow for maintenance activities after the construction itself? My belief is that yes, we can. We just need to consider technology and telecommunications channels earlier on in the stage of construction, rather than having it as an afterthought, as we generally tend to do now. So there is that thought that's been planted. We just need to see what that physically means, and we'll be working with the likes of Plinks, who provide 5G and other telecommunications offerings to sites, to understand what does this mean in terms of early adoption. So yeah, we are looking at ways where we can have CAP deployed not just for the construction aspect, but also for maintenance, and leaving a legacy piece in terms of telecommunications. And to the second point, in terms of remotely operating plant for lots of surveying and investigation, I believe in industry that this is already starting to be adopted in the likes of drones for surveying and other techniques. But I believe Mark Lawton may be able to expand on that.
I can, but I think really that's a subject for another time, really, and I don't want to take Doug's time. But what I would say is that all the technologies that are available, we're trying to utilize at the best capability, and we do need the design community to be a part of this, because they will make the product that goes into the machines. And if your efficient ways can help those machines, your assistance and knowledge is greatly needed. Okay, thank you, Mark. There's one last question, and then Ian's got his hand up. So, a couple more come in actually. So, what level of training would operatives need to require situations where to recognise situations where hazards are discovered?
It's a good question. In terms of the deployment of the technology, we need to make sure that the sensors are obviously fit for purpose and they provide feedback to the operator to ensure that the hazards are identified. So be that, for example, If you're on an embankment and you're operating the machine remotely, you start to go over the tilt limit. The machine would then need to, well, the sensors on the machine will need to pick that up and alert the operator to avoid further disaster. So, yeah, the training looks very different to what it looks like today. But yeah, Mark Lawton, I see that you've raised your hand on that point.
Yeah, and there's two areas to understand that why CAP is needed. So I call them hostile areas and passive areas. So an hostile area might be that you're doing mine clearance and somewhere. We don't do that. So this is a good use of robot machines because there's no one in there. Another hostile area is out in Western Australia where the quarries are, where there's people not getting there. So if we bring that into UK, where that means balancing ponds, borrow pits, quarries, large earthworks, embankments where there's no there's no people coming into the area, they're the target areas. Are we going to use this outside Tesco's in the high street? No, it's littered with utilities, obstacles, and everything else. So you're picking your tool for your purpose. So that comes into the considerations as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Ian, got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Hi, Emma. Ian Reedy. I work on the safety risk requirements team in SES. We own the standards for GG 104. Yeah. This is a really interesting area. We've done a lot of work with commercial and commercial use, private use vehicles, automation on the highways. Yeah. And did a lot of work with the drones team to enable those drone flights in what's, I suppose, a relatively well understood technology, but the risks were maybe not so much in the context of the use. Yeah. I'm just asking you sort of generally what risk assessment, hazard identification work you might have done already, and offer our support in helping you develop your risk assessments going forward.
So the quick answer to that is very little. There's been a kind of general understanding that if we were to remove the operative from site, it would improve health and safety. But like others have mentioned, there needs to be some consideration into understanding how those hazards are continued to be identified when they occur. So I'd very much like to kind of take you up on that offer, Ian, of working with you to understand how we manage those ways of working. Thanks,
Emma. What we found in the past is it's always the case with these things, isn't it? Is early engagement tends to be beneficial, even if it's at a fairly high level. So reach out to us, please. We'll be happy to have a chat.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, great stuff. So final comment from Robert. What is the governance thinking for gamifying to ensure the process is understood to be real life, that the work doesn't have 4 lives and a reboot solves any problem? It's a good point.
A very good point. And it's essentially, we're at a stage where we're too early to be able to answer that in terms of the governance. But it's a simple consideration that, we've got a scenario where we know that the future workforce is going to be operating in a different mindset. They're potentially not going to want to go out to site, in PPE and face the cold and the weather and the like. So how do we make sure that the workforce that are coming into the sector are actually attracted to it in the first place? And if we're going to remove the operative from site, it just makes sense to try and make sure that the controls are suiting their skill set. So I use the term gamifying very loosely there. But yeah, the governance behind it is yet to be looked at.
Okay, last couple.
Just can I just interrupt there? I think just with lessons learned from bigger industry disasters and that sort of thing, if we're creating this to be sort of integrated within the widespread industry as a sort of commonplace event, then the governance needs to grow with the developing technology.
Yeah.
And then you have a more integrated approach to we don't want to duck it, do we? We want to go hand in hand.
Indeed.
With it.
Good food for thought there.
Okay, last two. We've got a little bit of flexibility on the agenda, so I'll overrun a bit. It's not a problem. So yeah, so this is Rob in response to Robert Legg in response to Rob Butcher's comment. Playing devil's advocate, is an incident a safety issue if the plant falls over, but nobody's around to get hurt? Guess the technology will be able to detect reckless operators before damage is done? Question mark.
That is the ambition, that we'll be able to work in a more efficient manner with the plant. So whether it's going downhill and you control the speed rather than asking the operator to use the engine brake or the braking techniques, automation can play a part there, for example, to improve safety. If you remove the operator from the cabin, you'd need to instill that level of intelligence in the machine that it knows if it's going down a grade or going down a hill, it needs to understand the speed, the maximum speed it can go to, and operate the controls effectively. So,
okay.
yeah, it's again another good point that you raised there, Rob, and good considerations to take forward if we do go forward with any more phases of the work.
Okay, last one from Nicholas on a similar note. Would automated plant be used on brownfield sites where there could be ground contamination? Can equipment be safely cleaned, decontaminated?
Quick answer to that. My thoughts are I don't see why not. And my question back would be, what would be the alternative in terms of safety?
Yeah. Okay. Well, lots of questions there. We will share those. And you've responded to the majority, but we will share the questions with you as part of the minutes and separately. So if you've got any further comments, please feel free. And if there's any further comments that come through, obviously we'll pass those on to you and feed those back to the group. But yeah, very, very thought-provoking and exciting times.
Thank you, David. I'd just like to kind of end by saying thank you very much for all of your contributions. Some really, really good questions that I've raised there. Some which, have already been considered, some which have not. But I will say that any future work from National Highways on the space of CAP is reliant on DFT and then market analysis. If the outcome suggests that they do want to see continued efforts being, achieved in National Highways, then it might be me taking it forward, it might not, but to have those questions minuted and sent around would be really helpful so that we can ensure that those are considered in any future phases. So
okay, we'll certainly do that. Thank you very much. Really good presentation. Thank you. Okay, so we've got a slight change to the agenda. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, Phil Gregson's down with the flu, so we've done a little bit of swap round, and hopefully Mark Lamport is ready to go.
I am, Doug, and my colleague Sophie is on the call, patiently waiting to take part in that. So if I can share, because I made a couple of tweaks since I sent you the presentation earlier today. So if I can share my version, please.
Yep, it's come through.
Okay, and right, well, good morning, everyone. Yep, just to provide an update on the health and safety file digitalization task and finish group. So there haven't been any more meetings since the last PD working group in October, but there has been some activity on my part, bringing this task and finish group to a conclusion. Just a quick update on the various subtasks that we've worked on, the majority of which have been completed. As far as I'm aware, there are no other National Highways groups currently working on health and safety file digitalisation, although I know Richard is in communication with David Stone and Jason Glasson, and hopefully following this presentation, some further discussion will take place. We undertook a survey to find out where various organisations were on their journey to health and safety file digitalisation, which showed quite a broad variation, but we didn't really get any convincing evidence to say that anyone had really achieved it. I think an important conclusion in terms of end user requirements is that we've got significant misalignment and incompatibility in the way information is stored or communicated, managed, etc., and particularly with end user requirements. But I think, and subtask 4, I think what we hopefully demonstrate during this presentation, and Sophie is going to show us a GIS version that we've mocked up, just to show what can be achieved. I think what we've basically achieved proof of concept. When I originally launched the idea of looking at health and safety file digitalization to Richard probably 2 years ago, I think my main objective was to prove that it can be done, that the technology is there, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be taken forward. So there's a couple of work in progress items for me. I need to produce a draft process map, which I will do by the end of February. Got an extra day this year, which is good. Rob did a mapping exercise to see what the National Highways digital delivery and digital roads documents, how those would be relevant. And I think the conclusion was the work that we're doing here is aligned with those, but there isn't any specific detail or guidance. And lastly, in terms of outputs and deliverables, I am producing the final report, which I'll circulate obviously to the task and finish group before it finally is published for use. So, as I mentioned, Sophie is going to, in a minute, show us what she's developed on using Smart Atlas, and this shows what a digital health and safety file could look like. When you look at what's in CDM 2015 Appendix 4, and also what National Highways require for health and safety files, it becomes pretty evident you can't put everything in GIS. Well, potentially you could, but I think it would get very messy, and the key messages would get lost. So what I've put together is what I've called a health and safety file front end document, which covers some of those basic descriptions of the project, who the CDM duty holders were, who the consultants and specialist subcontractors, any previous health and safety files and key information sources, and then also there needs to be some sort of explanation about where the information is held in digital format. So it's really just a description of how the GIS base works. National Highways also require design information. There's such a huge volume of that it's merely signposted in the health and safety file to show people where that information is. Similarly, as built information, there's a vast quantity of that as well, and that would just be signposted from the health and safety file. But the key information that someone would need to know about the assets and hazards is now, as you'll see in a minute, displayed in GIS format. During the process of sort of drawing this together, I concluded that actually there needs to be two types of hazard marker data. There needs to be basically, I am a hazard, I'm an asset, I am a feeder pillar. These are the hazards associated with me. This is the information you need to know to keep yourself safe when you are working on me as an asset. And then there is also hazard-specific health and safety file information, which is really to do with either point hazards, such as mine shafts, linear hazards, which are utilities, or also aerial hazards, areas of contaminated land or unstable ground. So basically, I am a hazard. This is the information about me as a hazard, and this is what you need to be aware of. They require slightly different data schemas, data sets. Sophie is going to show you the data set around asset-specific health and safety file information, which is really what CDM 2015 Appendix 4 is principally about. Buildings, structures, whatever. That's really what Appendix 4 and CDM 2015 specifically covers. But we've developed a similar but slightly different schema for hazard-specific health and safety file information. So at this point, Sophie, can I hand over to you, please? So
Yep,
I'll stop
absolutely.
sharing my screen and let you take over, please.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time. As Mark said, I've created a GIS platform to display asset health and safety points. So in this example, it's for an asset along the M4. Very much want to emphasize this is just a proof of concept. We're just demonstrating the digital process that we can harness to digitize health and safety in their files. So in this example, we'll just click zoom right in, and you can see there that you can get very much an idea of where the asset is if you're obviously looking at a desktop at the moment, but we would be able to make this a mobile using another GIS platform that we very much have used in the past and have been fully integrated with mobile users, but also in desk studies. As with similar GIS platforms that we've done with national highways, we've included smart editors. So that means that the user would be able to select the data, the point or the asset, the health and safety point that they want, and go through and run through and see all of the information that is currently held. So you can see here, as Mark explained, we've got the asset types, the categorization, and we make it as user-friendly as possible to provide the what we would call domains, the options, the drop-down options to select and change these if it was to change or to update and go through. So you can see we've included all the information that we were provided, or I was provided by Mark, and it can also provide attachments. So if there's any photographs or any sort of design information that's relevant for the user to know. So if we close that, you can see the point's still there. You can also go into the point itself, and at the bottom we have a link to the reference document. So obviously with this being a demo, this just goes to a SharePoint site, but that can be something that anyone who needs to access can see all of the information, whether it's the data itself in Excel, if there's any sort of design information, if it's all the Word documents that come alongside these sorts of points and data sets. So that shows that we can really utilize, if there is a platform that non-GIS users, or the storage of the information, all the relevant documents can be stored there, and it can be linked to this point, which I think is really super helpful. We can then also, if there are multiple points, which there obviously would be in the real life platform, we would be able to view all the information within the attribute table. So this just gives a real breakdown of what the data is. So it's the same information, it's just in a slightly different format and looks a little bit more like Excel, which I know to a lot of people can be a little bit more people are a bit more comfortable with. There's also the addition within this sort of GIS platform that we can have a situation awareness. So if there is preparations for people to go out on site, they can say, for example, what will be within 0.5 miles of the starting point will be. So you just select there, and then there'll be a proper breakdown of the health and safety risks. So you can see here in this one example, there is just 1 point, but it could say that there are X number of points, things to be aware of whilst out on site. So it really gives an idea of what we could do for mobile users. And then if we just close that down. And then we also do have the ability to add additional data within this GIS platform. So just as a demonstration, I've added some third-party road rail datasets as long as national grid electricity cable datasets. So if I select this, and this again is just for that user experience, whether it's if they're working on at their desk or if they're out on site. So for example, here we've just got the road accidents data that just comes from the government, and then also just the normal road network. We're able to also change the base map, so whether we would want something that is imagery, so it's a little bit more looking like real life as they would expect when they're out on the site, or the OS data sets. And with GIS, it depends obviously on your license, but you would be able to swap and change that around, as well as whether that's on your desktop or on your mobile device, to help with a little bit more context of where these risks might be found. As we've said, it is a proof of concept, and hopefully it does demonstrate that we can put some sort of geospatial context to these health and safety risks, whether it's the assets, which this is the example of, or if we have the hazards themselves as points. So yes, that's everything that this the digital health and safety file demonstrates within GIS. This is the GIS platform that we use particularly at Arcadis, and we have used on other projects as well. So yeah, I think that's everything I'd like to demonstrate to you. Thank you, and I'll pass back over to Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Sophie. That was much more eloquently put than I could possibly have done, and yeah, it's as no doubt you made it people aware. You're part of our GIS team, and yeah, your life is immersed in GIS. So thank you very much for giving us that insight into what this could look like in practice. So I'll just go back to. I've only got a couple more slides just to finish off. Yeah, I mentioned that the hazard marker data schema for hazards would look slightly different. Obviously show you the hazard location, the descriptor, the category, what type of hazard it is in terms of, is it a point hazard, is it a linear hazard, an aerial hazard. This is a specific example I just took from the M4 again, where we've got some high pressure, intermediate pressure and medium pressure gas mains which cross beneath the M4. There's a reference back to the hazard elimination schedule, that M4SM 0.0730 gives you a unique cross-reference to the design risk management schedule entry. Type of work where risk could arise from the hazard, future construction alteration, and the risks. And as you can see from Sophie's presentation, the majority of these have drop downs, so you can select various options. There's some additional information in any special requirements there. Tells you who the asset owner is and what type of approval needed to work in the area. And then lastly, again, as Sophie showed, there's the ability to link to specific information. So in this case, link to services drawings. So I think the key conclusions is that the proof of concept has been demonstrated, and really this is just an extension of what the design community are already doing during the pre-construction and construction stages. So this is nothing new. This is really just moving it through into the handover stage. But I think a very key point, and I note David Olorential's very useful comment in the chat that this is the sort of information that OD would need, but we really do need buy-in from the end users to enable wider adoption. In my own view, this is the way we need to go. Putting information into often very lengthy health and safety files, the information just gets buried and doesn't get properly communicated. So lastly, and I think we've flagged this up before, that the misalignment between the design community and the end user maintenance community would appear to be probably the principal significant challenge to be overcome. So very lastly, next steps, I mentioned earlier in terms of the subtask, where we are on those, that there's a need to produce a process map for management and communication of hazards and risks through construction and handover into maintenance, and the final report. And I've started the final report. That's pretty much the contents there, and I think the key items will be sections 10 and 11, the recommendations. Sections 3 to 9 will really just summarize what we've concluded from the various subtasks, so that'll just set that out, but I think the meat of it will be in the conclusions and recommendations to take this forward. So I don't know whether anyone has any questions for either Sophie or myself.
There's a number of questions in the chat, Mark.
Right, I haven't seen those.
And a couple of hands up. Should we deal with the hands up first?
Yeah, okay.
So who was first?
Alistair was first, number 1.
Alistair, yes, yeah. Okay.
Hi, Mark and Sophie, thanks for that. I think your last slide kind of probably touched on this a little bit in terms of handing over information for maintenance, but looking at maybe for future designers, taking that health and safety file information to be used as pre-construction information if there's like significant works in the future on an asset and stuff. How do you think that information would be shared moving forward? Like, if looking at that map, would the designer need to go in and then pick out the hazards relevant, or like, I hope that makes sense. If you see what I mean, in terms of picking up the key information from it to be passed on for future design works.
I mean, what I would hope that is over the years, effectively, a digital twin would be developed as more and more health and safety file information is put onto the platform. So effectively, that would really be the pre-construction information, because you've got the textual, what I call the front end health and safety file, and then you've got all the hazards mapped on the drawing. So I think as a designer, I would find that information useful rather than having to trawl through a lot of documents trying to work out which assets have hazards associated with them, and where the other hazards are that I need to be aware of, whether it's unstable ground or contaminated ground or mine shafts or whatever. So that's what I would be my wish for the future, that this effectively, the GIS platform, which would link to previous health and safety files, would provide all the pre-construction information you really need to know around health and safety hazards.
And it would tick the box, wouldn't it, from a client handing over the hazards, that you would then know if, obviously if it's comprehensive, you would know where all the hazards are. Therefore, it's what you'd be expecting as part of your pre-construction information.
And I think a big benefit of this is the ability to update it. Health and safety files are notoriously difficult to update. If just one asset is maybe removed or an alteration made to it, it's really quite difficult to change the health and safety file. Whereas on a GIS platform, you could obviously go into the that particular asset and make the change and update. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. And sorry, another one. I appreciate there's a few other hands up. In terms of like historic information, then obviously if you're updating that as your project goes, is the hope that eventually the whole system would be like all information across the network to be added to it, so it's all.
That's what I would hope, that it would be over the years, more information would be added in. And in the the health and safety file front end, I did actually have a section on previous health and safety files, so that would at least cross-reference to those, because it's often quite difficult to find out what previous health and safety files actually exist.
So Mark Lawrence got his hand up.
So I've got a couple of statements. So I think the biggest one is, and brilliant Sophie, is that there's a lack of a geospatial community. If I'm just going to kick you off the screen a second and just present myself, is that just in this example there, we're doing much the same thing, is that we're listing the hazards in construction. I know Liz has joined as well. These are coming into that are on GIS and available. And this is the workforce that are putting the hazards in there later for after construction. So there's a simple form example, and you can raise it in there as well. Oops, wrong tab again, this tab. And then it's in a 3D environment as well. So we've got everything coming in there to be able to use. So I think that let me stop sharing again now. I'll give you the floor back. Is that the lack of geospatial community to bring together? I don't know Sophie, and she probably doesn't know. I read a GIS before it was that we're doing a lot of this already, and by forming a geospatial community, and I've asked for this for years, we'll bring all that knowledge together because we're all trying to drive for the same thing.
So just on that, Mark, and we've been given a number of contacts, so we're investigating those contacts within National Highways to see if we can move this forward. So we'll feedback as you know, as we get some communications with them.
But I completely agree with your comments there, Mark. We really do need a community so that we don't reinvent the wheel. And
indeed,
yeah, you're doing some great work there. I wasn't aware of the detail of that, and so yes, let's bring
and there's there at the national level as well, Mark, is that NUAR, which there's been presentations on, isn't readily adopted in National Highways, and that will be a thing at the end of this year. So that'll be an API that Sophie can bring in for all the utilities and everything, and it's a duty for us to send that through NUAR back through a statutory undertaker. So it's getting closer together with that digital health and safety file will be available for the design, the constructor and the maintainer. So the guy that goes to check that lamppost, will go on his phone and he'll be able to see the information. We're getting there.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
So Liz has got up.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that conversation really to say that there's sort of mirrored work around use of the geospatial type tools and that sort of structure of how you call your different hazards that you're raising, feeding into the new ISO standard at Lower Thames Crossing. And there is a working group together there with the HSE to develop this. So we absolutely need to get this sort of National Highways sort of engagement around the geospatial, because there's so much good work currently going on their projects, and that we need to be able to hand over all this information to National Highways, or hopefully in the same data structure so that it works and sits with National Highways ultimately back as the client.
Okay, thank
you.
I
think we very much need to look to National Highways to lead and guide on this going forward. I think it is. We must go in this direction, and yeah, there's a lot of momentum gathered, but it's not very well coordinated at the moment.
So there's a number of questions in the chat, some of which have been covered by the discussion, but Nicholas says, how do you collect residual risk information through an Excel sheet upload to the GIS data system? Question mark.
Yeah, I think that's something that I was really going to try to cover off in the process map of how that communication of data is made, and the management of the design risk risk management schedule is key to that, filtering out the significant residual hazards at end of construction, because a lot of the hazards in the design risk management schedule will have effectively fallen away because they were relevant to construction, but they may well not be relevant to the post-construction phase. So yeah, that's an important part of the process, that filtering out and communicating that information appropriately into the GIS schemas that we were showing there.
And I think Sophie responded on the same question. So this example was from Excel to GIS. However, there is definitely workflows of collective risk out on site and it loading into the GIS platform live. Also options to have report outputs, etc. And Nina's come back and said the GIS process looks a good way forward to utilise the health and safety file. Nicholas, type SA using CDM registers in Excel set up to record data in specific format that is directly uploaded to the GIS system, includes residual risk and location system. Okay, yeah, location data. Not sure what type SA is. Could we expand on that?
Yes, it's the design group for producing logistics and sort of structural designs for the HS2 railway.
Okay.
Infrastructure side of it, not the actual railway it sits on, but viaducts, bridges, culverts, embankments, that sort of thing.
Okay, and then you went on to say GIS data can be set up to filter and display construction maintenance and operation risks.
Yeah,
yep.
That was coordinated with myself and the GIS data managers so that my risk registers could be directly uploaded up to the GIS so that they could upload the residual risk information. So it's one side benefit of that I've found is it focuses your mind on the relevant information and to present it in a way that is direct but meaningful.
Okay, thanks. And John Pilkington's come back. This will potentially be a game changer in the transition to maintenance renewals environment. The building sector have been using this for a while. Nina, it's great that the community are doing this. We do need to take this on board within National Highways. And Rob, absolutely, and all work to BIM standards in CDEs such as Jacobs tie up to Project Mapper, Track Record Safety and 3D modelling in Revisto, A12, A120 widening have been primarily recorded in a 3D model environment linking the hazard identified by the design team into the model. So yeah, I know Jacobs are doing similar things to our Smart Atlas. Obviously, having worked with Jacobs on a number of the schemes in the Northeast. So I don't know if there's any more questions or comments for Mark and Sophie.
No, it's great to hear all the other companies working on it. And Liz, you mentioned LTC. I also worked on LTC, so it's yeah. I think we can all collaborate, and we shouldn't just leave it to a project and bring it up to the National Highways completely.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for your input and for all the comments and questions. Really appreciated. And yes, it looks as though positive response, and yeah, it'd be really good to get this moved forward in a coordinated way. So, thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Mark and Sophie. So we'll now go on to the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group and a presentation by John Pilkington on the Healthier and Safer by Design working group. So I'll just, oh, sorry, Liz.
Doug, I've just put my hand up to say, could I go ahead of John because I've got to dip out at 12 to do an interview. Okay. So I've got a Safety Hub update, but it should be quite brief.
Yeah, okay. I will just swap the presentations around, just bear with me a second. Okay, hopefully John doesn't mind.
Thanks, John.
Just bear with me a sec. And loading up now.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, just a quick Safety Hub update. So this is really covering off our December and January meetings. We have been sharing lots and lots of really good practice. Interestingly, Costain did a share around Legionella risks, which was really to do with sort of compounds, so temporary buildings and welfare units, and how sometimes you can create risks by changing the configuration of cabins and putting extra ones on and just changing the use of different rooms within the compound. So a really different sort of a share around water hygiene and Legionella risks from Costain. AI traffic monitoring to inform the design of TM was presented by Keir. And there is actually a Blue Star bin submitted and awarded for that, which is up on the Safety Hub website. It's well worth a look at. They used the AI camera technology to really think about the junction they were creating, and it's actually now not going to be a junction. This is on the A417 air balloon scheme. It's now going to be a roundabout at this particular place rather than a junction as was initially planned. And a presentation from Keir around smart hearing protection. So this is the EVE type system being used by Amy in specific areas. It was around the Severn Bridge and the Prince of Wales Bridge, where they've got particular issues with having to work while there's a huge amount of traffic flow. So really interesting shares. We put together our plan for 24, and basically we're continuing to support significant risks, and in particular the work of the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group. And so that many members who attend the Safety Hub are involved in task and finish groups supporting that work. We have set up specifically 3 different groups to look at live lane working and live carriageway crossings, and an assessment of how really thinking about how you assess your safe methods of work, whether you're going to put out TM, whether you can do something on a short duration stop. How do you actually think about that? And it impacts design, funnily enough, when you think about when you're putting in drainage and signage and lighting and cabinets, etc., at the side of the road. Do we really concentrate enough on how's that going to be maintained? How are we going to do that in a safe manner? And there's lots and lots of situations around the network where somebody somewhere is looking at risk assessments to think about how you do those activities safely. So we've got a little group looking at that to really share risk assessment tools, best practice, case studies, anything in that space. We've also had a request for a review of raising the bar 12, looking at safety critical medicals and the difference between national highways requirements and network rail. Plus potentially we're looking again at a review on drug and alcohol testing. And there's a final group which is looking at identification and recording of NERTS bypass cables and other hazards in the verge, because there's been a number of incidents where NERTS bypass cables have been taken out inadvertently through maintenance works, and the whole sort of network has been down for several hours / days in some occasions. So lots of work ongoing in those areas. Next slide, please. Just a couple of slides in here, and you can read these at your leisure. They're just some of the shares from Costain around Legionella, because they're just a little bit different. So if we sort of skip through the next couple of slides. So yeah, talking about dead legs and length of pipe work, boilers out of order or not working correctly. I find personally a lot of people turning down hot water temperatures in compounds because the hot water's coming out too hot. So all sorts of sort of common examples there. Next slide. And this is a little bit about the AI camera. So again, I'll send the link out to Doug actually afterwards with the blue star attached, so you can read all of this. But this was a really good piece of work where they looked at a different way of designing the actual scheme in the end. Next slide. Yeah, you can skip through these, but there's a good case study on this that I'll share. The other thing really to mention, and it's good that Mark Lawton's on the call, raising the bar 1 and 3 plant standards and people-plant interface currently under review by the Plant and Earthworks community, and they've got 9 key initiatives that they're looking to drive forwards. I've highlighted a couple here that I think are a particular concern for designers: 3D machine control and design for machines. There are 2 key areas that we will be looking at. But when you look at some of the other issues, it might not actually be obvious. But when you think about the shift to things like electrical plant, hydrogen plant, even HVO, what someone somewhere has to think about in the design of the temporary construction site work area is, okay, have we got enough electric to power all this stuff? Even for those of you who have big compounds with loads of EV chargers in, you'll end up building a substation to try and power it all. So there's lots and lots of things that this shift towards net zero is bringing, that we need to be budgeting for, costing for, thinking about the safe operation and maintenance of, plus obviously, from my point of view, the big safety thing around 3D machine control and design for machines, you can really completely eliminate a huge amount of safety risks to workers in construction by doing that properly. And I know it's not suitable for absolutely everything, but we really need to push this and try and do drainage and various other activities using these type of techniques. I think that might be my last slide. Yes. So, any questions?
Nothing in the. Oh, yeah. So Martin's got his hand up.
Yes, just on that last bit around the 3D machine control design for machines on construction. Can you do it on maintenance as well?
Oh, well, really hard because you've got your current network all built there now. But you've got to start somewhere, haven't you, is what I would say. So the challenge is we should be thinking about that when we're doing any, there's not going to be very many new schemes. But the ones that are being built, we need to be thinking about it, don't we?
Yeah, well, a lot of all that. Yeah, some not a lot of schemes, but there might be a lot of depots being built.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so the depots have to the bit around the need for the power coming in.
Yes, absolutely.
We're identifying that at the moment. We just don't have enough power coming to the depots.
No, you'll have to, and that is the thing. And I think people then, you think about, okay, we'll get build a substation. Well, that costs a huge amount of money, and obviously there's a huge amount of electrical safety that you have to comply with to make that happen safely. So, yeah.
We did actually touch on a little bit on that. Well, the maintenance side in respect to CAP. On the earlier presentation, but yes, it's obviously an area to be considered. I think the focus has generally been construction, but yes, obviously operation and maintenance was a general feeling. Obviously, needs to be looked at. Obviously, are there any other questions for Liz? Conscious, Liz, you need to be off, don't you?
I've got to jump off now. So, thank you. Nice to see you all very briefly today. So, I'll catch up with you all soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the contribution. Really good.
Thank you.
Okay. Cheers now. Okay, if John is on the call, hopefully I will.
Yeah, I have slightly altered my slide, so is it all right if I share the version that I've got? It's okay. I've just cut some stuff out. That's all.
Okay, I'll stop. I'll stop sharing. Yeah, okay, there you go.
Just. Not that. What's the agenda? Can everybody see that?
Yeah, it's come through. Yeah,
brilliant. So obviously, building on from John's intro earlier, just a little bit on the vision to eliminate health and life-changing harm by 2040 using the hierarchy of control. So a little bit of background on the group, and obviously the bit at the bottom I think is really key. that we need to consider construction and maintenance. Obviously, as we're moving into RIS 3, where there is going to be more of the kind of maintenance and renewals type work, you know, we do need to make sure that we maintain that focus, and we're not carrying on focusing solely or mainly on sort of greenfield new road construction. Bit of an update of where we are. There's been a change in the membership of the group, so I'm now the chair. Ian Spellacy has stepped away to carry out a different role within Atkins Realis. He's been replaced within the group by Rob Allen. Johnny Giles has stepped down also to be replaced by Tom Gibson, and Toria Thomas has left, and I'm awaiting confirmation of who will be a replacement from Arup. In terms of membership, we are looking for additional members. So if anybody is interested in sort of joining the group and participating, we meet sort of, it's about 45 minutes, I think, monthly. Obviously, and there is some sort of work to do outside of that in terms of a commitment, in terms of the stuff that we're going to produce or do produce. So the common intent has been drafted, which merged the original Safer by Design with health elements, so it's healthier and safer by design. So that will be taken to the steering group tomorrow, hopefully for sign off and publication imminently. Likewise, the healthier and safer by design vision document, which basically outlines the strategy and plan for this year, has been produced, and that will be submitted to the steering group tomorrow as well. And basically it outlines that we're going to be, you know, that the supply chain safety leadership, healthier and safer by design working group is going to be sort of a conduit between the principal designer working group and the SCSLG steering group, if that makes sense. And obviously, you know, we'll be hopefully supporting each other to develop information and materials, you know, going forward. So progress so far. Obviously, last year we did some work on the decisions about eliminating, substituting, or engineering controls for dust, noise, and vibration for a number of different work activities. That's sort of all being processed. We did present on that, I think it was at the last Principal Designer Working Group, regarding the output. We've developed the new common intent. So the next step that we discussed last time was about the case studies and guidance notes, and there was talk of a template to be sent out. I know that didn't happen, and one of the things I wanted to propose was potentially using the one pager that we currently use for case studies for the safety alerts and stuff like that. So that sort of one page template that's already being used. So whether we'd give them different numbering scheme, because I think they're whole life design numbering. So whether we just give it a different numbering so people could see the difference, but you know, I don't think we should be reinventing the wheel. And then also a review of raising the bar 26 to include health and focusing on above the line solutions. So this was a little bit on the guidance. So I mean, if we can agree, or if we agree to use the existing template, you know, I think if we can get some volunteers who've got case studies against these topics, that'd be good. Because I know we're all doing some good stuff, and there's good stuff that's being done with construction partners on sites. But if we could get those case studies so that people can see what good looks like, I think that'd be a real benefit. So rather than sort of picking people, which kind of I think was what happened last time, if people have got examples of you know, these topics where something innovative's been used, or they've used a different methodology or material that's been successful, you know, then I'd love to hear from you. And if we can produce one of those one pages, that'd be great. And I think that is my brief update. Obviously, I've not been to a meeting yet, so I think the first meeting I'll be attending is tomorrow. So hopefully, at the next Principal Designer Working Group, I will have more information, and I'll have a stronger update of where we are, what we've done in terms of moving forward, because obviously I didn't want to move too far forward in terms of our plan before I'd engaged with John and the steering group in terms of where they were going, in case I was going off at a tangent. So yeah, so that's where I'm up to. Any questions? I see Anne-Marie's put in a comment around potentially joining the group. Obviously, you know, I don't need to know now, but if anybody is interested, if they drop me an email, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you, John. We had a 5-minute break. If everybody's okay, do people want to carry on or take a quick break? What's the general consensus? Should we carry on then? Okay.
I think carry on, Doug. Nobody's raised any objection, have they?
Okay. Okay. Well, so I'd like to welcome Robin to the meeting as secretary to the Temporary Works Forum, and you'll be giving us a background and update. So over to you, Robin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, coming through. Yeah.
Jolly good. So I don't have a presentation. It's the first meeting I've attended, and what I will do, as I've emailed to Doug just earlier, is to draft a note for inclusion with the minutes. But basically, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. It's been very interesting, very well organised, and the preparations have been, the presentations have been first class. Also, in terms of correction, my title is the TWF Operations Director. I'm not the secretary. My predecessor was David Thomas, who was the secretary, who some of you may know from the past, and he left in the summer last year. So I'm still on a bit of a learning curve, and this is the first meeting I've attended of this group. And I'll just go through a few things. I think the agenda says background, current issues and concerns. So the background for TWF, if you don't know, it's a forum, Temporary Works Forum. It's a pan-industry group. It has quarterly meetings. It's been going for about it's its 15th year, and it has around 250 members and growing. And it sort of runs by sharing knowledge and information about temporary works and raising the profile and the importance of temporary works within construction. It has numerous working groups. Not all of them meet regularly, but they are all listed rather like British standards. And when stuff crops up, then they reactivate and produce guidance. So the meetings take place 4 times a year. They're well attended. Over 100 people typically would come to the Institution of Civil Engineers, where we have 2 meetings this year, and then we have one at the iStrut-E in September. And then the 4th meeting, usually in December, is held at a university where which has a construction degree course with temporary works modules incorporated, and this is a piece of work that we're engaged in getting temporary works recognised at degree level. So more on that to come, not today. But at these quarterly meetings, apart from the networking benefit, a lot of design-related discussions by people, presentations on interesting projects that they're not selling their services or their capabilities. What they're doing is talking about a project where challenging pieces of work have presented themselves and obstacles have to be overcome. So I'll demonstrate that by just outlining to you what the next meetings in March, 13th of March, at the Institution of Civil Engineers. And the two presentations there, which would be of interest, are the award-winning project Euston box propping, and then also there's a presentation by Tensar on tyre pressure research, and that of course relates to construction vehicles and temporary roads. So just moving on a bit more, talking about the university aspect, we do fund research projects, and we also plough back money into in the form of scholarships for students and help them with their with their costs as they do their degrees and research projects. And typically the universities where I've had involvement so far are Salford, Liverpool and Swansea, and there are several others too, which we're in discussions with, and we're hoping to broaden that pot, if you like, and include some other universities, for example, Bristol, Southampton and Portsmouth. The next point I would say would be the work of the group is to produce guidance. There are several working groups, as I mentioned. There are 3 working groups in particular working on guidance topics, which hopefully will come to fruition this year. The first of them is the Granular Working Platforms Working Group, and this will be reviewing and revising existing guidance. It's already a very big document, and this will be looking to publish in the later part of 2024. The Working Group on Low Carbon, Working Group 32, has also been meeting regularly, and we also have a couple more which will be of interest. And the first one is the mesh fencing, which is WG 42, and that one is producing some guidance, again, hopefully for the mid-year. Additionally, there's debate and discussion going on about perennial topics such as hoardings and rebar. And rebar is a topic which might be of considerable interest to this group, and hopefully I can spend a bit of time on that at the next meeting. So lots of working groups, lots of guidance, and much of it is free to download from the TWF Temporary Works Forum website. If I hadn't already mentioned it, it is a not-for-profit organisation. Everything is ploughed back into developing temporary works awareness and trying to fund research into it and raising the profile of temporary works within construction. I think there is a lot of commonality and in terms of engagement and overlap with what I've heard today. So I'm kind of surprised that National Highways isn't a member of TWF. So I might have a word perhaps with someone about that, and hopefully you can join. For example, we have got Network Rail, we have HS2, so it would be a logical sort of fit. We are also producing e-learning courses. There are 2 in existence at the minute, and it's about they're about to be joined by a third one, which is the effective management of scaffolding to BS 5975, and that will be issued fairly soon. That's close to issue, and this guidance and these learning courses are free of charge. They're not charged for, so it's all a service to the industry. I think that covers the main points, but I will expand on anything else that I might not have covered in my note, which I will send round tomorrow, presumably to Doug, for inclusion with the minutes. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, thank you, Robin. I can't see anything in the chat at the moment. And as you say, I will circulate notes. Rob's got his hand up.
I just want to say I infrequently tap into the TWF notes and guidance, and find it very useful. So yeah, good to have the presentation. Thank you, James.
No problem.
Okay. Unless there's anybody else. Well, thank you very much, and as I said, welcome you to the next meeting, which is in May, and I'll distribute the minutes, which may take a couple of weeks to get out, but we'll get them circulated. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, much appreciated. Okay. Okay, so we'll now move on to output from the task and finish groups. So be a little bit shortened, as we've got a number. Well, we've already had one presentation and a couple of just verbal updates. So the first one, the suicide prevention design tool. So Nikki Tweedy was unable to attend. However, she's given me a brief note. So the draft suicide prevention standard has been issued to the Technical Standards Committee on the 5th of January for consultation, and that's going to run through to the 16th of February. The expectation is that the standard will be published later in 2024 or maybe early 2025. In the interim, the team will be working on putting out training and updates of other related standards, because obviously it does impact on a number of existing standards, and that will be linked to the PCF process as well, and undoubtedly 3D as well. I'm hoping that we'll get a more detailed update in our next meeting in May. So the next task and finish group was the knowledge management task and finish group, and unfortunately Martin has has announced he couldn't make the call due to an emergency. So I don't know if Mark, you've managed to.
Yeah, I can give a bit of an update.
Great, excellent, thank
Doug. I'll sure I share the right thing. Can you now see the terms of reference?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so the group has met 3 times, and our next meeting is in the 21st of February. And really, we've concentrated in the meeting so far in actually defining, what the objectives of the group are, and putting together a terms of reference. What I'm showing you here is I don't think is actually the final version, so just please regard this as a sort of fairly final draft. But I thought it would be useful to just share with the group where we are on this, and let you have a look at it, see what we're trying to achieve. We thought, first of all, it appropriate to get some key definitions straight for clarity. So definition of knowledge management, designer, taken from CDM 2015, and also design risk management, taken from the IC guidance. So we're using some industry recognized definitions here of those key aspects. We then looked at what the purpose of the group should be, and really it's around common goals to capture, share, communicate, and apply learning from experience to improve health, safety, and well-being in design projects and project outcomes. So that's really the headline purpose of the group. We realize there's various sources of learning which we can tap into. We've tried to align with the principal designer working group terms of reference. There's still, there's a check with John Dowsett in there, but I think we're fairly clear on where we want to go on this. We're conscious that information is spread around across various platforms. There's the National Highways Knowledge Management SharePoint site, and there's the Highway Safety Hub. And as someone commented earlier, there's a lot of information in the Highway Safety Hub, but it's not always that easy to find it, and it's not all up to date. So we think we need to get better at organizing the information so people can find it. In terms of membership of the group, that's the group there with Richard, Doug, and myself, and a number of other colleagues from across the industry. John Pilkington there, who spoke a few minutes ago, Roger Swainston from Jacobs, Martin Sherlock chairing the group. And we've also decided at the last meeting that
Spotted it for you.
Well, we lost Mark. Mark, I think you've gone on to mute.
Someone must have muted me. So okay. Right. That's. Am I still sharing, or do I need to?
You
reshare?
are still sharing. Yeah, still sharing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I don't know where we got to on that, but yes, it was decided at the last meeting that we needed to invite the Phil Farrar, who I understand is effectively the owner of the Highway Safety Hub. We obviously need to collaborate with him. He's very important in this. So we're going to be meeting 6 weekly going forward. We've got a list of standard agenda items there, and we're maintaining a tracker with owners and deadlines for actions. So in terms of outline objectives, we're thinking about what we already have, what's current, what's worth promoting, and primarily making it easier for end users to actually use what we have. So there's some key objectives there to raise awareness of the existing resources. We see the knowledge management site and highway safety hub as key sources, but we need to communicate better. Raise awareness. I think many people were not even aware that National Highways had a knowledge management site, and what's in it. There's a lot of really useful lessons learned documents in there, but again, if you're designing some drainage, you'd need to do an awful lot of ploughing through lessons learned documents to find out which parts of them actually apply to drainage design. We need to make it much easier for people to find the key information they need. And we thought probably also useful to signpost to other channels and resources. There's lots of good information published by ICE, CITB, etc. So we thought it would be useful to try to sort of make a bit of a catalogue of those and indicate what useful information there is out there. We then looked at prioritising the objectives. There's quite a few there, and this is still work in progress to actually prioritise all these various objectives and activities, because there's quite a lot there. Obviously, we need to focus our attention to get the best value out of time and input, and most benefit to the end user. So that's where